Dave to assist.
Good afternoon. Everybody could please take their seats. Today is Monday, October the 18th, 2021. We are here for a school board workshop. The time now is 1:01, and the order of business today is to go over the agenda review of the October 19th regular meeting, and the second item will be the Guardian program, as well as followed by the good of the order and adjournment. And if we could begin with Dr. Savage, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. If I can hear coming through the audio here. We'll just go in the order of the questions, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, can we need one more second, because Ms. Giovanelli needs to join us.
Absolutely. I couldn't hear the audio that was coming through here or not.
Okay, we need to add one more chair.
Okay.
Do you need me to move, or me to move up there?
No. We'll add a chair right there.
My instincts tell me probably you were supposed to be up there,
Well,
but they told you to come down.
Yeah, so Dave, if you don't mind, can we just scoot you over a little bit so that way we can put three here?
let me just,
And he doesn't even need to sit here until he presents, right?
you want me to go up there?
That's correct. He won't, not until we're through the agenda review.
Yes. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're just gonna bring another chair down here. Thank you, Jeff.
Would you like to come up?
That's fine right there in the middle. I would be more than happy to sit in the middle. Yeah, stay, yeah, have a seat.
Mine doesn't either.
I have to go in
I don't
through
know, maybe it's,
email.
I don't know, maybe it's somebody else. So. I've got a chair.
She's got a chair. They can just stay right there to the side. Thank you so much.
I do need agenda review, I don't have anything like that.
There you go. There.
Dave had it. He doesn't.
This isn't mine. I'm not able to log into Board Docs.
Okay.
You need this.
No, I
Want to
have.
just take a minute to make sure.
Okay, we're gonna take just a few minutes just to get everybody logged in.
Right now.
I apologize for the delay.
For those resumes.
Oh,
You know how we get, in Outlook, we get the emails that have the links? I'm seeing if I can.
He's not presenting at this moment.
Okay, I hear.
Okay, so we are back live. Again, I apologize for the delay. Dr. Savage is just getting ready to go over the agenda review. Dr. Savage, thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. We'll just go ahead in order. The first question that we have here is from the consent on I-1 from Business Services, the approval of the resolution declaring the intent to reimburse the school board from tax-exempt obligations in connection with expenses incurred with respect to the acquisition, construction, reconstruction, renovations, and equipping of certain educational sites, land, facilities, and equipment. The question was, please explain how does this affect construction and the sales tax? And our response here is from our Chief Financial Officer, Dr. Amy Desimore. Dr. Desimore?
I don't believe it's on, Dr. Desmore. No.
Can we try the podium up there?
Try the podium right there. Thank you.
All right, how about now? I can tell the difference. Okay, so this, good afternoon, everyone. So this doesn't affect the construction at all. What this does is it gives us the ability to continue construction on an appropriate timeline without the COPS financing in place yet. So because until we know everything, you know, the total cost of the project and everything, we can't get the COPS. We need to know all of this information. So what this reimbursement resolution does is we can spend money from other sources up front for construction in phase 1 and beginning of phase 2, and then reimburse ourselves with the financing proceeds once we receive them. But because of the COPS vehicle, this is a separate and distinct, what they call reimbursement resolution that we have to have in place in order to be able to do that. So that way we don't have to stop the works while we're waiting on all of the information we need to get the COPS.
Okay, Ms. Gittens, this was your question. Did that explain that to you, or do you have?
It kind of, sort of. I may just need to sit down with you to make sure I understand this. But in other words, big picture, expenditures come up for construction, you take it out of a different account, and then this is to allow you to pay it back to that account. Am I correct?
That's right. That's correct.
So I'm just trying to figure out which account then do you take it out of?
Well, could be one of several places. It could be out of for a construction project out of the property tax or the 1.5 mil. It could be out of impact fees if we have it there, or it could be out of sales tax.
Okay, and I didn't quite understand when you were saying about when you first started talking about the COPS, that it would allow us not to have to do what?
To wait to spend money until we get the COPS, because we don't have, so phase 1 for a construction project can be underway for quite some time. Until phase 1 is done, we don't have phase 2 to know the total project cost in order to go out for the financing for the COPS. So it allows us this reimbursement resolution. We can spend money from the other accounts, so we don't have to wait to get our financing. We can just reimburse ourselves when the financing rolls in.
Okay, and I think what is confusing to me is to not know how much a project will cost until it's further on in the process. That part's confusing to me. You know, I'm not a CPA, but wouldn't you have to have some idea of a budget for the project? And this is saying if you have to go over, so.
No, well, so we have an estimate, right? We have an estimate in our capital plan for each project, and the estimate is how we build it into the capital project itself. But when we go out for an actual financing for that project, we're going to go out with what we know of as the hard cost of that project, not an estimate. We're going out with whatever we find out is the actual cost based on our phase 1 and phase 2 work.
Okay, and this.
After that GMP or guaranteed maximum price comes back.
So when you go out with the hard cost, how does this particular thing fit into that? Is this after you've gotten your hard cost and then there's other expenditures?
Well, no, it's anytime until we get the actual financing in, the proceeds from the financing in-house, in the bank, right? And so any money that we spend on a project before because once we know what the guaranteed maximum price is, right, and it comes to the board, and if you all approve that, then we're going to finish the COPS process and actually come to you with the approval of that COPS, and then it has to go out onto the market to be priced and sold. So it's a whole time frame for all that to happen, which will even be after, you know, the guaranteed maximum price is known. And then once we finally get the proceeds from the sale of that COPS in-house, now we can reimburse whatever it costs or whatever expenses we pay for up to that point. And now we're using the COPS proceeds then to pay for everything else for that project through its completion.
Okay, all right.
Are there any other questions regarding this particular item?
Did I, yeah.
Did that,
Yeah, to an extent. Where I'm concerned is when and how when do we get the guaranteed maximum price, the GMP, in relationship to a project? There are stages of a project, and at what point moving along in that project do we get the GMP?
Well, that's at the beginning of what's referred to as phase 2 of the construction project, right? So once we get to, you know, phase 2 kicks off having that GMP, and then that's when the total project cost comes to the board for approval or not. And then once the approval happens, then that's when the rest of the project is ongoing. If I'm answering that.
No, you are answering. The question is, like you say, the rest of the project. So we don't actually see what that maximum price is until we're halfway through the first phase of it.
Yeah, or, well, yes, or through the first phase, which is in relation to the actual project cost is a small portion of the project cost.
Okay.
so you're giving the estimate?
No, I understand that, but anyway, I will continue this. We will sit down and I will give you my concerns, but thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Desamore.
yeah.
Dr. Savage?
Yes, Madam Chair. The next item is J1, approval of personnel recommendations, general. 2 questions. Question one, please provide process timeline for each appointment, number, names of participants at each stage, candidates, screeners, interviewers, etc., job description, finalist resume. Second question, please explain during a severe teacher shortage, we are still appointing so many coaches and specialists. Why is there not a freeze at this time? Please discuss ESE shortage and its effect on compliance. Our responses are from Rob Dodig, our Executive Director of Human Resources.
Good afternoon. The first question is answered in a packet of information that was provided to you all. My staff scrambled this morning to get this information, so I thank them publicly for providing that to you all. If you have questions about that, certainly feel free to ask. If not, I'll move on to the follow-up question. Yeah, Ms. Morgan.
So I just want to back up what you said. I did ask for it, I guess, this morning, and I am very grateful for the work that you and staff have done to provide this information. It is very helpful to me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Ms. Morgan. Thank you. Okay, so the second question, please explain during a severe teacher shortage, we are still appointing so many coaches and specialists. So, and is there a freeze? Well, I would call it a modified freeze. Before I came back on board, there was a modified freeze put in place for hiring coaches and specialists in those schools that have regular teacher vacancies. And with the exception of Tier 4 schools, where the executive directors and academic services provide permission upon justification by those schools to appoint these folks. So what you're seeing is a list of those folks being transferred essentially into those positions, all of which are either Tier 4 schools or have no vacancies at this time.
And Rob, if you don't mind just clarifying for the Tier 4 in our tiered system, or would you like me to do so?
Yes,
about the
please.
tiered model.
Yep.
So our Tier 4 schools represent some of our most significantly at-risk populations in terms of where they have shortages oftentimes in staffing, less experienced teachers. And so in our tiered approach to how we support our schools, our Tier 4 is a designation that our academic services folks have given to these schools that are truly a huge focal point of our school system. So I have, Dr. Sparrow, if I've left anything out, you're free to elaborate on that as well, if we have any questions about Tier 4 status.
And can I ask that, Nancy?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So you said these are positions that are transferred into or out of Tier 4s?
No, what you're seeing is, for instance, they're all changes of assignment, so they're teachers going to specialists or coaching positions.
Within the Tier 4?
Typically within those schools, correct. Or they're schools that don't have vacancies, and then they're allowed to put people in those coaching and specialist positions.
Okay, but simplistically, if I'm in a Tier 4 school, I don't have any vacancies, I remove 2 teachers to put them in a coaching or specialist position, now I have 2 teacher positions open.
Theoretically, yes, that's correct.
And that's what concerns me, because if it is a Tier 4 high-need school, and our biggest thing is to have qualified teachers and time with students, is this the time to be removing that teacher from a situation, a classroom where there's students that are definitely in need, probably in the achievement gap? I don't know. I'm not following that.
I understand your concern, and if Dr. Spiro wants to come up and address why Tier 4 schools would be allowed to hire a coach or a specialist, I'd be happy to defer to him.
Thank you, Mr. Dodig. And that's a great question, Ms. Gibbons, because that's why those principals would work directly with their executive director to talk about whether or not they're going to be moving that teacher or not moving that teacher. And that would be also a principal decision based around their individual school and what their school needs are.
I get that, and I don't think you're really ever going to convince me. It's just me. I feel like when the bell rings and the door closes, there needs to be a qualified teacher, enough of them to cover the students in a classroom. And we have, like I mentioned, the ESC teachers, there's shortages. When you look at our job requests, job descriptions, we're asking for ESC teachers. It's, they're like golden out there right now. So, and with the ESC teachers, from what I've been told, if we don't have enough and don't have paras and don't have that all in sync, then we have teachers that are out of compliance. They are concerned that if something happens in that situation, you got to, a 504 or something, and something happens, are they going to be covered by the district because we didn't have enough bodies in there?
And I have Ms. Bowen's going to address that specific one for you. But what I will do is I have not looked at those Tier 4 schools that have vacancies and if they're hiring coaches, what that impact is inside of their individual buildings. I trust the executive directors to do that, but I will make a commitment to go back and find that information out for you as well.
And if the executive directors from the top down are told that at this point we need to make sure that we do not take teachers out of classrooms. I mean, I don't know, I know it's their decision in the administration part of the schools, but are they being told this is something we really don't want to do?
Yeah, and we have told the principals that before the beginning of the year. We told them, other than Tier 4, you are not allowed to hire unless all of your vacancies were filled in the classroom first. Tier 4 was trying to provide that extra push and support we talked about before at some of our briefings. But I will find out for you which schools of those Tier 4 schools hired coaches that then left a vacancy in the building. So I'd be curious of that information as well.
Thank you very much.
And then let me have Ms. Bowen come up and talk to you just a little bit about the ESC question as well.
And while Ms. Bowen is making her way up, just want to kind of elaborate on that as well, that one of the challenges I gave the team at the beginning of the summer in June, the late June, was we knew there would be a shortage. And we also knew that part of our ESSER plan, hiring a lot of coaches at the various different buildings would potentially take from one hand to feed the other. And that is exactly what we don't want to do. But the need for coaching is very real. The need for expertise to guide our teachers on demand in the areas they need support is absolutely very real as well. So one of the asks was to continue to find external coaching services or opportunities where we could have expertise to truly guide. And I'll explain that when I was at the state of Florida in an executive position, we worked with a number of entities all across the country that really looked for standards-aligned instruction and really were true experts. That even though, certainly it's more expensive to have those types of services, the advantage is it doesn't stretch your internal bandwidth, and it ensures that the folks who are delivering that expert level coaching are truly experts, that they've seen high-performing systems across the country. So that's just, again, one other way we're trying to challenge to work around the fact that, we have a limited amount of folks that are applying for things. We still have a great deal of vacancies, and yet people do need expert coaching. That is just an important part of adding value to our existing employees.
Ms.
May I
Gittens?
make a comment on that? I get it, but kind of peeling back the onion, it makes me wonder then, if we continue to need more and more coaches to help teachers, do we need to go to our feeder partners at FGCU and FSW and wherever these teachers are coming from and give them additional training before they get to us? Because what it's doing is, on our end, is costing us more time and more teachers out of the classroom, because we're getting teachers that are not prepared.
Ms. Gittens, it's a great question. That's one of the thoughts behind the Innovation School, was to try to have some more of that embedded alignment between, the actual local university and so forth. The only challenge that I'll just say, and again, Rob can probably elaborate more on this, is that we no longer have a real genuine feeder only. We're picking up career changers from all over. We're hiring from other, whether it was Puerto Rico and so forth. We're hiring people from wherever we can, and because it's such a disparate, we have to pick up teachers from all over the place. You really need to have a really thoughtful professional development system intern, which we do have some great work going on. Don't want to go too much deeper to elaborate on it, but it is a emerging challenge that we have to continue to focus on.
Okay.
And so I'm going to,
yeah, go
if
ahead.
you don't mind, thank
That's
you.
all right.
I'm going to have Ms. Vaughn and then Ms. Patrica.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with most of what Ms. Gittens is saying, and I want to add another piece that could be the elephant in the room here. The people that are, I feel, the very best in providing support to, as I call them, the newbies and those that are struggling, are our seasoned career teachers. And yet, this is a huge problem that's contributing to our need for more coaching and specialists and all that. I've never, as a teacher, was convinced of the efficacy of having a lot of release time for people to go in the classrooms and help. This isn't exactly what we're talking about, but it is what we're talking about, because that, to me, is why we are needing more coaching, because A, we're losing those people that we can't be losing, but we are, and B, quite frankly, some of the teachers that I have talked to, first of all, they are so overwhelmed themselves that they just don't have time to spend time with other people, especially when they are covering other classes. And B, some of them are so disgruntled, their attitude is, too bad. These people just got $47,000 starting, and it took me 7 years to get that, or something similar, and we're not doing ourselves any favors by alienating this group of people, losing these people, overworking these people. And to me, that is a huge reason why we have so many people struggling on, the first, second year teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Patrico?
So I'm still stuck on the tiers. I thought that RTI was a three-tiered system, and I could be having a total brain fart here, and that more tiers have been presented to us in the past, but I have it in my brain that it's three. Is this new to Lee County? Is this?
It typically is a three-tiered approach. Dr. Sparrow, do you want to kind of just explain how the fourth tier came into being, the discrepancy with the tier 3 and schools moving in and out of that tier?
Yeah, so normally, yes, it is a three-tiered approach, but this summer, as we were analyzing the data, we really looked at the tier 3 schools and said, of those tier 3 schools, which ones are the most critical need? And internally, we were calling it tier 4, which then has become part of the language, but it really is a three-tiered system, and then we really identified the most.
All right, my brain's not exploding anymore.
I understand, thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments or questions, Ms. Gittens?
Okay, finally, and thank you for giving me the time to discuss this, but just a thought. When we take someone out of the classroom, then that either makes the classes larger or something. Someone has to absorb those students. Have we thought about even leaving those folks in somehow to have smaller classes? Because the smaller the class, the easier it is, to teach. It's just all a real concern for me. It really is. And I thank you for allowing me the time to discuss it, because it's something that's very heavy on my heart.
Yeah, and all of your concerns are obviously legitimate, and they are, I would say everything is on the table, honestly. We are having a very difficult time retaining and hiring employees, and it's not just teachers. And it's more than just there's a labor shortage, because there really is not a labor shortage. We have to be able to attract people to come to work here.
Right.
And Dr. Savage and others have charged me with somehow trying to figure all of this out. I've been here a month, and I've been shocked by what I have seen. I will tell you that with Ms. Bowen sitting here, because your next question was about special education, there are 40 ESE openings today. So that's a very big concern. So your question was about compliance. If you want her to answer,
I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon. So as Mr. Dodig just said, there are 40 instructional positions open. Those may not all be like a self-contained classroom, like an ESE classroom. Those could be any ESE-related instructional position. So it could be a resource teacher, it could be a behavior specialist, those type of positions. So I don't want to give you the impression that there are 40 classrooms sitting out there. However, in those instances, those teachers are also able to get substitutes for any of those positions. I know there's also that sub shortage going on as well. So I think your question, Ms. Gittens, if I'm correct, was more along the lines of if there's something out of compliance, the teachers are concerned that it is going to come back on them. And what I can say about that is that this is not something that they're personally conspiring to do. This is a result of the pandemic. It's a result of a shortage. We have all of the data that supports that we are trying to hire. We are trying to get these people in. Some of these are very specific positions. We are consulting, we're using consultant contracts, we're consulting with outside services to get whatever services we can to provide those services. As long as we are doing that, if we are then making up those services once we're able to hire, put them in place, those types of things. And if there was anything to come back on the district about that, yes, we would owe compensatory services for that, but that is really where we are involved, is at that level in providing and discussing that with the parties involved about what the compensatory services would be.
So if a parent of an ESE student makes a claim or whatever, even goes further with it, saying that their specific needs or 504s or whatever were not complied with, the teachers then are still protected by us, correct?
In the situation that we're talking about where this is the result of this teacher shortage pandemic and the district is doing everything possible, even in the schools, they are reworking schedules, they are doing whatever they can take, they're pooling people from here or there. And, and in some cases, our district personnel, my administrators are going out to support and to provide services whenever we can, in order to lessen the impact.
Okay. And I thank you for that, and I end with the fact that this is why the concern with removing anybody in any classroom to do anything other than teaching.
Yeah, Ms. Bowens, I would just ask too, because in moving all of these, a lot of them would not necessarily be in the ESE department per se, moving these teachers. But even, they're already scheduled, right? Everybody, if they have an IEP or a 504, those meetings are scheduled with the parents and everybody that's involved in that, correct?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
those meetings are happening when they are supposed to be.
Correct, and if there is a teacher that is not there, in that there's somebody at that school that has been assigned as that case manager, and if it's not somebody at the school, then they may be utilizing our district staffing specialist as that contact, but yes, those meetings are still taking place. In fact, we just had FTE week last week.
I just wanted to make sure that was, thank you for
Absolutely.
that. Was there any other questions regarding this?
Can I just say one last, on what you just said about the IEPs?
Yep.
And I've been involved in that when I was a teacher, and there again, you have to take the teachers out of the classroom in order to do that. So this is yet another time that they're out of the classroom, so, anyway.
But, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Madam Chair, if I just may close out that one item, obviously, we're going to continue to have personnel items come forward, but one thing that I have challenged the team to do is to really reconceptualize. So what Mr. Dodig was explaining about the shortfalls, we have to really bring fundamentally different thinking to this issue, because while we are experiencing this here in Lee County, it is not a unique phenomenon just to Lee County. It's happening all over the country. What we're finding in the labor force is that folks are being more selective. They understand it's a competitive marketplace, and so our ability to think differently, I think could really be a big difference maker in terms of attracting the workforce, not just now, but in the future. So just kind of looking at everything through new eyes, because it's certainly a major issue here. So thank you for all those questions.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, you had something to say?
So
I'm
just
sorry.
on top of that, I was wondering with identifying the Tier 4 schools, those most at risk. So that was done over the summer, and I'm wondering, what's the input from the schools, from the people at the schools, the teachers? And when they are going to be selected to be coaches and leave their classrooms and do something else, what's the level of input that they have? So I'm just wondering about that, because there was a special that I watched the other night regarding the shortages in the workforce, and in fact, in the Sunday paper, there was a list of things that we could do better, and that included, the way we involve and treat our staff. So it's not just giving direction, you're going to do this, but hey, is this something that you would be interested in helping us with, and kind of sell it to them. So I think, I'm just wondering if that's part of our change in thinking, is to really be a lot more instrumental in involving people at the personal level in their own career choices.
I would hope so. Dr. Savage, do you have
I can't,
anything that-
I'd have to have Dr. Sparrow speak to the Tier 4, but I can say one of the core vision elements that, I really wanted to set forward with strategic engagement was to do exactly that, to help make it be less of a top-down concept, but really more to, do the students feel connected to this office and this board and all the work that's happening here? Do they feel like they have a voice? The teachers have a voice? Do principals have a voice? Assistant principals, parents, community members, trying to forge that forward. And that is going to be monumental transformational work, but that is really, I think, the future of what we have to do. And so, I know, Dr. Sparrow, you can speak to the Tier 4 specifically, but as a larger than just the Tier 4, that is certainly a piece of what we have to be doing.
I was just using that as a for instance. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, so the inclusive part was during the summer, the beginning of the school year, when our teams went out and met with schools. It was also with their leadership team, which have teachers on it as well, when they looked at the data components and talked about action planning moving into the start of the school year. So that certainly was not done in isolation. And then I would also say, I certainly would hope that our schools, when they are interviewing and they're selecting staff for their school, that they do have an interview team that includes members of their school team, so that they have input on who's going to be a choice for their particular school.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Vaughn has one.
Yeah, I just have to add something, piggybacking off what Ms. Fisher said. All we need to do is to take a look at the schools / principals that perennially have huge exodus from their school. Compare some of the schools where principal's been there and nobody's moving, nobody's going anywhere, and if that principal is transferred, staff members, many staff members want to go with him or with her. We consistently have had principals that have been on improvement plans and have this exodus every single year and do not have good, they don't have a climate of accepting the professionality of their teachers. And you know, we can recruit, but unless we are retaining these key people, it's like, it's worse than a hamster wheel, because it's just, we're just going to keep throwing off the people that we really need and bringing in new. It's just, that doesn't work. We have to do something in that regard.
That's very true, Ms. Vaughn. Thank you, because it costs more, of course, when you do not, when you have to hire, bring in new people, always. That's great. Ms. G.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because that's exactly it. The responsibility has to fall on somewhat on the administrator, the principal in the school. And that retention is huge, because we could keep hiring, but if they don't stay because of what their environment is, and, you know, accountability, it's back to the accountability. We all have to take responsibility for that. And so I think it's key, the principal is key. And if there's a high turnover, at some point, there always is a high turnover once a principal's new, let's just be real. And we have to let that dust settle a little bit. But at some point, we have to look at the data and the information, and if it continues year after year after year, then we have to have a serious talk. But I think it really goes across the district as accountability has to happen in the principal's office, and that responsibility needs to be on them initially or at the end of it.
Thank you.
Well, and I really appreciate those comments. I'll just say, from an administrative standpoint, we understand there are many factors that kind of play into things, but none is more important than kind of the working conditions that are set by that school administration. We know that. We've seen it not just in schools, but in departments, divisions, that the type of culture that the leader helps to create is certainly a critical part of that. I do know that HR absolutely reviews that data in terms of the exodus and the numbers and trying to study that. They also work with school development on that piece, because clearly, but I would also say, the job of a leader is very, very difficult, and they are constantly trying to put what will work for kids, and they have their own skills and strengths they bring to the table. So, the number one word I look for is development. We're talking about how we develop our teachers to allow them to be successful and flourish. The same thing we have to do for our leaders. And so I know that that's a big topic that I've had a lot of discussions with our leadership team about, as how are we developing, not just creating that accountability where they have to perform and that they have to retain staff, but what are we doing to support them in that effort? I think the burden is on us as district leaders to show we aren't just saying, well, that's the principal. It's, well, what are we doing to support the principals who are struggling with that effort? Because they might be great at other things, but maybe, what are we doing to support them? So it really is, we're one team. We are one team. That's kind of my approach of that piece, is with, it's reciprocal accountability, high expectations, high levels of support to reach those expectations. So thank you again for another great conversation around this topic.
And I'm going to say something which it's not part of this, but there's someone in the room who is that leader at his school, and the teachers love him, and they'll do anything. And that's what you need. You need people that are going to work together with, the higher up, because that way they become one team. So yes, thank you.
And just to put a plug in for Principal Leads, that's one of the things we're trying to do with Principal Leads as well, trying to bring some soft mentoring into it as well. So they're not in any way evaluative. They are 100% about a support system of creating that collegiality so that you can take various different principals, help them learn from each other, learn from their lead, just to have an opportunity to bring their sounding board of issues. That's something that we just initiated again this year, and so just another plug. There are many more things we could go into, but that's another powerful one. So thank you for highlighting one of those great Principal Leads as well. Okay, I know we have more agenda to go through here as well.
Yep. Okay.
The next item is K1, approval of purchase requisition to CenturyLink Communications LLC. Question was, why was it allowed to expire and go month to month? Does the contract include providing services to underserved areas of students? Our response is from Mr. Dwayne Alton, our Chief Information Officer.
Good afternoon. So the reason that the contract was allowed to end was because we're in the process of changing internet providers. So what we're doing is we're changing away from CenturyLink, or Lumen as they're now known, over to Summit. And due to some permitting issues, Summit is running behind. So CenturyLink agreed to... What's the name of the company? Summit Broadband. Okay. And CenturyLink agreed to continue with our current terms on a month-to-month basis until we complete that project. And the Summit Broadband folks then are responsible for any overages and costs they have to reimburse the district. So that's why we went month to month with the contract. So as far as who is served by each school is connected to the district on this network. So it's not specific to any particular area. It's the whole district. So both, our schools and underserved communities and here as well.
May I, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, so I know at one point there were partnerships available to get services either at a nominal cost or nothing in some of our underserved technological, challenged areas. And I didn't know, is that with specific companies? Did we have that kind of a partnership with, with CenturyLink? Will we have it with Summit Broadband? I know Comcast had something. How are we getting that word out and promoting to the people in underserved areas, our students, that this is what you can do, or this is how we can help you?
So right now it is available, the information is available. This is separate from this contract. Right. We cannot negotiate in this contract, because this is an E-rate contract. We can't negotiate discounts for outside of this to be tied with the agreement. But outside of that, there are some community partners that, and the one that we promote is Comcast. Right. CenturyLink did have a program, but we don't promote that program because it did require the families to have the expertise to set up their own wireless hotspots and all this, and they had limits on the service and that. So the one that we do promote on the website is Comcast. It's called the Internet Essentials Program. And the schools also have access to mobile hotspots for our students that don't have access to internet at home. And so in addition to what's on the website, if they contact their school and look for options, they're going to get those various options.
And this is probably to the superintendent, but I would really like to see us do an all-out, campaign or blitz or whatever we need to do to make sure that especially those highlighted communities, are aware of what they can get, how to do it. If we have to do a evening session or a morning session to show them, help them walk through it, have some computers up there in the lobby to show them how to do that. We've got to go a step further to make sure that they understand and know how they can do this.
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
But I believe that's just a service that Comcast offers to anybody. That
Offers
has
to-
nothing to do with us. That's a service
Correct.
that they are offering. So that would be a service that we would be providing if we were disseminating the information for Comcast, because they're doing it as their own business.
Well,
Correct?
if I may.
Yes, please.
Even though it's Comcast business, it's a service that we can offer to our students, along with, here's how you can get a hotspot if you need one. Or here are the options to get you connected, whether it's Comcast or the extra, what is it?
Mobile hotspots.
Yeah. So I just think we need to be able to make sure that they know what is out there. It's not promoting a company, it's promoting getting the students what they need.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so what I hear Ms. Gittens saying is that we probably need to have an update on how we are providing communications to families with respect to the requirement that their kids access technology at home as well as in school.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
Any other questions?
any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Savage?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We are on to L2, which is in the operations area, approval of the memorandum of understanding between Board of County Commissioners, Lee County for shared use, temporary changes. The questions are specifically, what does routine maintenance cover? What have been the financial contributions of the county toward periodic maintenance, renovations, upgrades of district facilities beyond the routine? Please explain the shared use and the changes. Define routine maintenance. Why the change? Does Dunbar not have a softball field? Why are there not one East Zone school or one West Zone school? It's interlocal agreement. Bonita Springs and Gateway High Schools are not in the rotation. Why? Explain. Please advise what has changed and why. Does this portend new district obligations under interlocal agreements in negotiation? So we have from our planning department, Ms. Kathy Ebal, who can answer these questions.
Thank you.
So I've created one answer, and hopefully it gets to all of it, because there was overlap between the different questions. So the maintenance on the field covers 1, lighting, 2, lawn maintenance, including irrigation, fertilizing, aerating, top dressing, and regular mowing, 3, pest control, including herbicide, fungicide, and insecticide, and 4, fencing. There are other fields in the original county shared use agreement. This one that we're bringing for today is only for changes and additions to that agreement. There are also other fields in agreements that we have with other municipal governments. So this is not a comprehensive list. This is a very specific, tailored list just for changes or additions to the original agreement. We are in the process of doing updates to the agreement with the county as well as the agreement with Cape Coral, and we will be bringing both of those agreements to you in the coming months. It is our goal to update those agreements before the springtime. There is a softball field at Dunbar, but there are other fields in general that are on campuses that are not being utilized. You can see in the changes that we're asking for that we're actually taking away fields away from the Estero High School. This is because the county does not need those fields. So just because a field is on a campus, these are only related to the field space that the county, or when you see the agreement with Cape Coral, that Cape Coral has asked for use of. In terms of maintenance that goes above and beyond routine maintenance, we are working with the county and our maintenance department to develop a list of that, and maintenance and planning will get an answer in your upcoming board documents. And I think that covered all of your questions.
Okay, Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, you were thorough, but you went through things pretty fast.
Okay.
Okay, so you characterized routine maintenance, mowing, fencing.
So we put them in 4 categories. The first category is lighting, in general lighting.
Okay.
2 is lawn maintenance, which includes irrigation, fertilizing, aerating, top dressing, and regular mowing. The third category is pest control,
Okay.
which includes herbicide, fungicide, and insecticide. And the fourth category is fencing.
Okay, so then, is the county alone responsible for the routine maintenance, or is it shared like every other time, or?
On the fields that are included in this interlocal, and the county is the one responsible for those 4 items.
Totally?
Totally.
Totally, so the schools don't have to do, all
On
right.
only those fields. So if you have a campus that has split fields, the county would take care of the fields that are covered in the interlocal, and they would not be responsible for fields that are outside the interlocal.
Okay, understood. And the reason that I went on to the next part, which you started to answer, I don't think you have the complete answer yet. Obviously, when the county is also using our fields, there is more wear and tear, and any of the fields, I mean, I've seen, we have contracts where fields have to be fixed for tripping hazards and, you know, different things like that. So we, as a school district, then, on those fields that are routinely maintained, we do all of the periodic upgrades, fixes that go above and beyond mowing and pest control, and is that right?
I'm trying to think of something that wouldn't be covered by routine maintenance in the example that you presented. A trip hazard, I can't think, like if it's a trip hazard that would have to do with lawn condition, that would be something they would be responsible for on a field that they are responsible for it. So, I mean, I think if you're talking about things that would happen as part of a normal wear and tear of your fields, the county is responsible for those issues on fields that are part of our interlocal. But that doesn't mean there aren't things that go above and beyond. So when I think of something that's above and beyond, and these are items that we are working on through the update of the interlocal and being much more specific. One of the problems with our current agreements, both with the city of Cape Coral as well as with the county, is that there is a lot of ambiguity for interpretation, and I'm looking at Kathy and she's nodding her head. So these are the things that Ms. Dupree-Borno and our team are trying to work out with Ms. Sarah Johnson, who is the attorney who is drafting the agreement on our behalf, that we're very specific as to eliminate as much ambiguity as possible. So an above and beyond issue might be care of a press box or care of the scoreboard, things that go above normal routine use and maintenance of fields. Those are 2 examples that come to my head. Maybe Mr. Dupree-Borno has another example of something that would go above normal wear and tear and routine maintenance.
That's pretty much the gist of it. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but I think those are pretty good examples.
Yeah, well, and I guess in asking that question about the above and beyond, I was kind of looking at some of what you just said, because, again, what is routine maintenance? What if there's, I don't know, something goes wrong with the irrigation system and all the grass dies? Who replants it?
So if the
irrigation company, or, I mean, I don't know great examples to give you, but I think you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. There are things that happen that go beyond mowing and pest control, and, you know, what if whole, so the lighting, they're not installing the lighting fixtures or poles. They would just be responsible for if lights go out, that sort of thing.
So we have a base standard for lighting, and if they go above our base standard, they would, and wanted additional lighting, they would be responsible for installing that additional beyond our standard. Otherwise, yes, that would be, regular maintenance would be the ensuring that they're functional and ensuring that their lights are. To the irrigation question, if an irrigation system was failing, that would be something that would have to be identified through the routine maintenance, and then if there was a replacement of the irrigation system, that would be, those are items that we would determine a cost share on. That's the way we traditionally have done it. We did one recently with Sanibel where there was some cost sharing depending on who was responsible for what use. I mean, we're not, so those items where there's a replacement consideration in column, that's where we go into the cost sharing. And again, our current agreements aren't that great at really well defining that and how the cost sharing comes to be, but that's why we're in the process of updating it. The reason we're bringing in this change addition agreement now, even though we're working on a full update of the agreement, is that these are fields that the county needs use of now, and they don't want to wait till we, because it will probably take 3 or 4 more months to get the new agreement ready for approval, and so they want to get this addressed now. Ms. DePrimo?
So the only thing I can add to it in terms of the specifications and how specific we're being with the new interlocal agreement, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Is that we even have an exhibit that even goes down to how many times a week you're going to come and mow the grass. So it's very, very specific. We needed a placeholder right now with this MOU, but when we get to the interlocal, which we're hoping will be the template that we will use from now on, it's very, very specific. So.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear that, because underlying these questions was also my personal feeling that our county commissioners aren't exactly generous with us as a school district. They like it when schools are equipped as hurricane shelters. I mean, they like our fields, they like different things that we can offer. And that's what I was hoping, that we spell this out really specifically so that it doesn't become a losing proposition for us and a triple win for the county. I mean, that doesn't sound very partnership-like, does it? But I'm just trying to be realistic, because county commissioners tend to cut taxes, and we tend to need more money. So that's what motivated what I said.
It's very, very specific in terms of very detailed, and the cost allocation is very clear, so.
Yeah, great.
And this is just the shared use agreement that we're talking about right now, not the other items that you talked about would be covered by another agreement that we're in the process of updating, which is the emergency management agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have Ms. Giovanelli and Ms. Morgan. Are there any other questions that Ms. Ebal did not answer for you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Ebal. Dr. Savage?
Yes, Madam Chair. We're on to L6, which is the approval to piggyback the Florida Department of Education ITB number 2020-16 bus purchases and optional equipment. Questions are, have we applied for grant money for the purchase of electric school buses? And do we have the staff to drive the new 43 buses? So I have a response here from Dr. Desmore and Roger Lloyd.
It's coming. So is Dr. Desmore going to speak on Mr. Lloyd?
She will speak on this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. So no, we have not applied for any grant money for electric buses. We have researched them as an option, but some of the issues that we have not yet gotten past yet include cost of the bus itself, the cost of the necessary infrastructure, the length of our routes and how long the batteries last, and then the charging time of the batteries themselves. So no, we have not, to this point, applied for any grants for electric buses. And then the 43 new buses that we're trying to obtain, they don't require additional drivers. They're not expanding the route, they're not expanding the fleet, they're replacing older buses in the fleet.
Ms. Giovanelli, did you have any other questions for that? Okay, and Ms. Vaughn, or?
Well, I was just
I'm gonna give
doing,
you 3 minutes.
yeah, I was doing some research on the electric buses, because I believe that from federal government, there is a push, of course, for clean energy and all of that. And one article that California, Maryland, and Florida lead nation in electric school bus adoption. It talked about Miami-Dade getting the buses, Broward. I didn't go beyond that. I also did see the cost of one of those buses and wondered if with our routes, the same thing that Dr. Desamours just said, if we would run out of an electrical charge before we got the bus back to the depot. But it seems to me in these articles there was money, and I think one of them talked about the difference between, you could buy, I don't know, what does a regular bus cost?
About 120,000.
100,000, what?
It's about 120,000.
120, and maybe 400,000 for an electric bus, and that the grants, you paid what you would pay for a traditional gas guzzler bus, and then the grants would supply the shortfall on it. And it is maybe we don't have the money now to do this, but this is the future. And Florida is, surprisingly to me, signing on for this. And I think at some point we need to get on that bus, bus, and start seriously looking at bringing in some of the new technology before it's a requirement, which will be quite a few years down the road. But why not start with little steps, or at least apply for grants for this?
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Workin, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. G.
So we're still looking for a COO, or no?
We haven't currently. That isn't one of the positions we've been looking for.
Okay. Because this is also coming up in construction. They've raised the question of why are we not looking at new architectural modalities, whatever, as we look at schools. And so, my comment here would be, I don't think there's a lot we can do until we have someone who has some expertise in that area. I would hope that if we're looking for a COO, that one of the things that we are really interested in is the sustainability of our equipment and what we're using to operate long-term. So I don't know that it's particularly feasible right now, but I think that needs to be a long-term goal of ours.
And I'll say, just in response to the COO piece, that's part of the reason we're expecting the executive leadership at this level is really ensuring that specialized experts in these particular areas are the ones kind of driving that piece for the future. I know, it's Mr. Lloyd is the name we all know, but, he's the executive director of that area, and I'm going to say he's very plugged into the state level conversations. And so were he here, I guarantee he could give you the rundown, not just on what the cost of an electric bus is, but even the life cost. They don't just look for that initial purchase, but then all those additional fees. And I would just say that's kind of the benefit of this piece. That's one of the ones we have been hiring for the construction side, is that executive director who looks at the planning, construction, and the maintenance side. So even though the COO piece tries to pull together the disparate areas of that safety, again, COOs look very different from district to district. Sometimes they're including food services, sometimes they're including, they omit certain areas, transportation, and all the complexities with all logistical operations there, as well as construction. You might find in certain districts like Miami-Dade where they have a chief facility officer who's looking at it. So it really is more about ensuring that we have experts kind of driving this piece. And I think for us, that'll never stop. At the executive level of leadership here in this district, we have to be thinking broadly. That's where we have Mr. Dodig talking about HR. He's not a chief, but he is certainly, trying to ask some of those questions about reconceptualizing our HR staffing to be responsive to this evolving landscape. So all of our leaders in the executive realm, I really expect that type of transformational looking out, looking at other sectors. That's really important. I'm not going to look to a singular individual to kind of rescue us for the future, because quite frankly, I interact with these people across the whole country, and we're all learning from each other. So I would just continue to push on the idea that there is a person out there that's going to have all the answers for us, because it's that continued engagement across not just our sector, locally, other sectors across the country. You know, the answers are there, but I don't typically find that they're within a single person. So I just want to kind of push on that piece a little bit for some healthy dialogue.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli, and then Ms. Patrica, and then we're going to end this section.
Regarding the buses, I think that this is thinking out of the box and being proactive instead of reactive, like Ms. Vaughn's saying. As we see fuel prices increasing, and I don't foresee them decreasing, I think that even if we had one bus, and the batteries do last, actually, you know, and that savings could be, I think, of benefit, but I'd like to see the data on that, and I'm sure it's a continuing, ongoing, you know, in California and different places, that getting the information and allowing some of that data to accumulate. But I think it's something to look into, and I would be curious as to the benefits, because I think they're there, especially with the fuel prices. And even if it's one bus, that might be the benefit, is just that route that goes across this, you know, county so much. But hopefully our proximity plan will also help with counteract some of that. So we have to think about, all the pieces have to be in play. So there's a lot to think about. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. G. Ms. Patrica.
So I remember a long time ago when Mr. Cody was still here for transportation, staff put together a long-term, and I'm going to use the wrong words, strategic plan surrounding facilities and energy efficiency. This was around the time that staff had a very concerted effort to decrease the amount of money we're spending per square foot for energy. Do you remember that? Am I jogging your memory? So perhaps it's time for us to put in the parking lot for discussion, revisiting that plan and seeing where we stand, because if I recall correctly, electric school buses were 20 years down the road in that plan. And again, this is just a fuzzy memory that I have of a presentation that was given to the board many, many years ago. So it might be time to revisit that. If we could put that in the parking lot for board discussion, Madam Chair, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Dr. Savage?
That was all the questions within the agenda review section.
Okay, great, thank you. So seeing that, we will now move on to our next topic, which is the Guardian Program. Ms. Fisher, will you share your mic?
Well, good afternoon. For the record, Dave Newland, Executive Director, Safety and Security, Emergency Management. Good afternoon, School Board, Superintendent Ken Savage, and Attorney Bruno. I was asked to begin today to talk about the Guardian Program. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can we check to see if we can get the slides on the other screen as well, please?
Oh, it's over there.
Can we only have it on one? Thank you, they got it.
Okay.
So I was asked today to bring in front of the board the concept discussion about the Guardian Program as a force multiplier with our current school resource officer program in our schools in Lee County. Looking at this, there's a couple of things we want to think about. Would the Guardian Program, would that meet? How would that look for the school district of Lee County? What would be the benefits and what would be the challenges? And so by doing this, one of the things I was able to look at was when I attended the commission meeting, I was able to listen to actually a presentation on the current Guardian Program as it currently exists right now. I did have a conversation with Chancellor Hall as well about the funding sources. I did talk to the Department of Education to also verify funding sources, what's available, what's out there, so we can look at that for the school board and for the district, you know, what's out there if we want to go forward as a force multiplier. And also, after looking at research, I contacted multiple school districts throughout Florida and talked to persons in my position to kind of to find out how are they, if they are using the Guardian program, how does it apply to their school district? And I tell you, when you look at the data and when you talk to each district, it's a little different, and I'll go into that later in my presentation, but I had a lot of good conversations with other districts throughout Florida, so it was interesting to see how each one applies differently the concept of guardians based on what they're dealing with in their area. So a little bit of history going back, Marjorie Stone Douglas High School Public Safety Act. This was created, the Guardian program, the Coach Aaron Fey's Guardian program was created back in 2018. The concept at that time was the best way to keep highly trained personnel into the schools to protect our students, either using a current existing staff member or people that are assigned or hired from outside the district to be brought in as guardians to fulfill the role of a security person without incurring more costs for the school. So you look at the Guardian program, what are some of the requirements? When we look at a guardian, they must pass psychological and drug screening. That's some of the requirements that's required by state. That's not our own personal specific requirement, but these are the minimal requirements that you must at least pass to be a guardian. 144 hours of training, 80 plus hours of those are high liability firearm training. The rest is other training that's included with the Guardian program. That does not include ongoing training that would occur at least so many hours per year, as well as, again, going into, then at that point they expanded the Guardian program to include licensed security guards as well as certain school district members or charter school employees who could volunteer to participate in this program. The statute 1006.12 does require a safe school officer at each of our public schools to include either the following: a school resource officer, a school safety officer, a security guard, which could be a contract security guard from an outside source, and a school guardian, which could be a school employee. So let's talk about the funding sources. What's available out there if the school district of Lee County was to look at the Guardian program as a force multiplier? What is currently available to us right now? So the state of Florida provides a safe school allocation for the school resource officer program, which could be used for the Guardian program. The current funding that we get, I'll go into the next slide, it gives you the specifics as far as what we get each year, but the current funding does not even cover 50% of the personnel costs that we currently incur with the SRO program. Again, of course, the school district of Lee County supplements that cost from the general fund. There also is a Guardian grant that the sheriff must apply for that would basically cover your operating expenses. Operating expenses can be anything from training, weapons, range fees, uniforms, radios, any type of equipment, belt, retention holsters. Those are things that a grant could cover. Again, the sheriff must apply for. What it does not cover would be salaries, so those are not covered by a grant. I have asked that question to confirm that, and that is the case. So if you look at this next slide, this gives you an idea currently. The allocation funding I mentioned that we get from the state, this gives you an idea what we currently get from the state and what is given specifically to Lee County, and where does that money go? So for example, for FY22 allocation, $5.1 million went to Lee County School District. The statewide, and you can see across the board, has been $180 million statewide. Part of that $5.1 million goes to alternate to suspension programs at our schools. $550,000 goes to our charter schools. Again, these are based on enrollment. And then for us, School District of Lee County is $4.3 million. And if you add those costs up, the School District of Lee County cost, charter schools, alternate to suspension programs at schools, that's your $5.1 million. Now, that does not cover, again, like I mentioned before, it does not cover all of our costs for the SRO program. So for example, this year we're looking at spending $1.7 million out of our general fund to supplement the cost of the SRO program, which brings your total to $6.9 million. Now that's an allocated amount, Because at the time the budget's created, we don't have the contracts solidified yet, so we're estimating what the costs are based on from the prior year. As you can see, that's across the board. If you look at FY21 actual and FY20 actual, which goes to your expended SRO program of $6.1 million. Again, as you know, I talked with finance about this. We don't know our other costs could change throughout the year possibly. So, but that money's in that budget for that program for this year. That goes over our costs we get from the state. Again, which as you can see, there's a slight increase that we've gotten each year, but not a lot. If you can look at FY20 to FY22, it's not a big jump from each year. And I'll say, if you look at based on the school resource officer program, based on each municipality, sheriff's office, their costs go up too. Their personnel costs by contract, by cost of living. So that's a moving number each year. So this is some data I got from the commission meeting, from the presentation that we got from the Guardian program, just to give you some idea on numbers that what does it look like statewide for the Guardian program, who's using it, how many school districts. So the number of schools in Florida are 3,785 schools. Law enforcement officers assigned to the schools is 2,997. Guardians assigned to a school are 1,384. Districts with Guardian programs in schools, 45. Those with no Guardian program are 22. Districts using the Guardian program to supplement SROs is 19. Districts using the Guardian program only, 26. Districts with guardians employed who have no other responsibility, 22. And that's a very important number that I'm going to get into later on in our presentation. Again, when we look at the challenges, that's very important to remember. So again, I know we're looking at a force multiplier, but this is the part I've learned from contacting the districts as far as an employee. So again, 26 of them use Guardian program, but 22 are employed, have no other responsibility. So we talk about taking a current position and applying it to a Guardian program. What happens to that current position? And are these positions, the new ones they've created to supplement the Guardian program, they've funded on their own? So that's some discussion we'll get into later on. As well as this talks about the concept with guardians in uniform. Some, as you can see, some have uniform or identifiers of the 20. Some have some type of identifiers. I've seen pictures of some that have sashes across their shirt or something on their polo. Could say a yellow polo that has Guardian on the back of their shirt with BDUs, but some have no identifiers. So talking to the school districts, like I mentioned, every district seems to have their own story as far as why they use the Guardian program. Some districts use a combination of SROs and Guardians, often due to the cost of the SRO. I know some districts are getting charged 100%. Some have to help fund the capital cost for the vehicles. They can't afford the SRO, so they may, for example, they may keep a SRO in the high school and the middle, but put Guardians in the elementary. Again, it's based on their funding. Some districts, again, I mentioned before, they can't afford it because of the 100% cost. Also, the other problem is, the obstacle, is some districts can't hire enough law enforcement to cover those schools. And again, that's based on that specific area that we're talking about. Everybody's a little bit different. Some districts use Guardians to staff elementary schools, like I said before, and use SROs for middle and high school also as a cost savings. There are obstacles with that as well, because by statute, as we all know, that a law enforcement officer is required in several things, such as threat assessment team, that person must be on every school. So if you have a Guardian only assigned to that school, you still have to get with that agency to have a law enforcement officer assigned to that threat assessment team for that specific school. And that's just one of the obstacles. So when I look at benefits, and there's a third one I'm going to add to this that I didn't add on to this presentation. So the in-service training costs and equipment are covered by the grant. So I mentioned before, the Guardian grant doesn't cover salaries, but it covers all the operating expenses, which would be your training, your equipment, anything that would be incurred as far as equipment for the guardian. A force multiplier to assist SROs. Again, that's why we're here today talking about the benefit of that force multiplier. The third benefit I would tell you would be that the fact that when you hire your own guardian as a specific employee for the school district, you can also set your own policy to what you want that guardian to do. As we mentioned before, you're dealing with 3 or 4 policies, now you deal with 1. So those are some of the benefits from talking to other agencies, what they have, again, from our conversation. So what are some of the challenges? If we were to look at the force multiplier for guardians for this school district, what are some of the things we have to consider? We have to identify funding to cover salary and benefits costs for our guardian program. And I say that because if we were to either create a new job, let's say description or job position for a guardian as their sole purpose, we have to cover the salaries and benefits for that position. If you use existing positions as administrative staff, you have the $500 one-time stipend. Is that going to be sufficient? You know, what was that current position that they're already assigned to do? They already have a current position or employed at the school district. What happens to that position? Is the idea to strap a firearm onto somebody that has a current position that already has a job duty, or is the focus to focus on protecting looking for the active assailant on the property? So you're doing 2 jobs. So we have to look at what does that challenge look like. Securing a sufficient number of staff to volunteer to cover the school. So if we were to say, well, we're not going to create a job just for this. We're going to look at securing a sufficient number of staff. How many will we actually get with a $500 one-time stipend? So we don't know what that number looks like. We have to look at how many schools we have, number of high schools, middle, elementary, how many we're going to staff, and is that realistic? We don't know yet, but that's something to think about. It's a challenge. The commitment to ongoing training and funding for ongoing training. So I mentioned before there is a grant that the sheriff applies for that covers the training. But that 144 hours is the very initial training that person will go through. I will tell you that as much as law enforcement trains in high liability, firearm training, all the things we do in high liability is just as important for that position themselves to also train just as much. Because I will tell you, in a high situation, a very tense situation, when you're dealing with an active assailant, muscle memory is very important. So that's why it's repetitive training over and over again so that person can respond effectively and efficiently. Would we require uniforms and standardization on how firearms are carried and secured? What I mean by that is, so if we look at the Guardian program, as a challenge, do we want them identified? Do we want them in uniform? And I mean by a standardization of firearms, my apologies. What I mean by that is, as law enforcement, as you know, it doesn't matter what gender they are, they carry the same type of equipment, same belt, same location of a firearm. So if we're looking at giving a current employee that same to carry a firearm, how do you want them to carry it? So it should be standardized, it should be in a retention holster. Right? What I mean by that is a retention holster prevents the gun from being removed. It's harder for somebody to remove it. So if I'm involved or I'm helping to break up a fight with students at a school, we don't want the firearm falling out. We don't want it being taken from a student. So again, same thing, in a situation that's very stressful, you have seconds to make a split-second decision. You have to know muscle memory, where's that firearm at, how's it carried on that person. It should be in the exact same position. I will tell you that, it's very important. You can't just carry it in your bag or keep it in your desk. So that's a very important thing to think about as a challenge when we talk about the Guardian program. One of the other concerns I have is what happens to someone's current employment status if an employee applies for the Guardian program but does not pass the psychological or drug screening. So I have a current employee that's currently employed by the school district that wants to be a guardian. They don't pass the psychological. What does that mean for that person's current employment position? Again, another challenge we have to think about. Current employees also filling a guardian position will be taken away from their normal duties, possibly creating a need for additional positions. So if we're going to use a current position somewhere as staff, somewhere in the schools, They already have a job function. So what are we talking about here? Are we talking about having them do both duties? Is that really effective? And I will tell you, when I mentioned that before, that number to you about the 22 and 26, and that was a part that when I started putting a chart together, talking to the school districts, they go, well, we're using current employees. I go, well, I don't understand that. How do you do that? So I started calling they're the districts to find out more information. I understand, how does that work? What are they doing in their normal position they were hired for? How are they doing both? They go, no, we've created a job just for guardians. They put a job description together, requirements, and they fund those positions through the school district. There's no other funding available for it. But ones I've talked to, they want them just doing the act of a guardian, which is to stop the active assailant. They don't want them doing both. They can't do both jobs effectively. So when I talked to them about these are current district employees, well, they are. Well, they didn't already have a job at the district. They were hired for that purpose. And that's the part I didn't know about. Let's see here. So the other challenges, Florida statute requires law enforcement officers to be on the threat assessment team for each school. I mentioned that before. Now, we're talking about a force multiplier, so this would not affect us as a force multiplier. But again, when you don't have an officer at a school assigned, that is a challenge because you wouldn't have an officer present. So you have to work with that agency, hopefully, to have an officer available to respond to those threat assessment team meetings, be available during that process. The challenge I mentioned before, a guardian's sole function is to stop the active assailant. So there's so many other things that, in other words, law enforcement does, but when we're talking about a guardian as a force multiplier, that's their sole function to stop the active assailant. Now, I mentioned before, in the beginning of my presentation, one of the advantages that some districts have found out from creating their own job description, the requirements, they can create what they want that person to do beyond that. Whether it's out there working the car lane, parent drop-off pickup, because that's their employee now. So those are the benefits that some have seen from that. But again, that's because they work for the school district. Depending on current staffing utilized for the Guardian program, negotiation may be required with unions. So again, if we were to look at staffing, bringing staffing in, in other words, creating a new position, or looking at pre-existing positions already employed by the district, then could go into negotiations with the union. Again, we're talking about a $5 one-time stipend. Right now it's being offered. Additional cost for the school district will be the increased cost for liability and possibly workers' compensation. I did talk to Ms. McFarland about this to find out if we were bringing a Guardian program, how would that affect us? My job is to bring you all the information as best I can. If we were to consider being a force multiplier, I don't want to miss anything or have a surprise cost that we weren't aware of. So I want to make sure if there's anything that possibly could happen, that we're all aware of it if we decide to go down this road as a force multiplier. So this, again, like I said before, this would increase costs for liability and possibly for workers' compensation. Again, other discussion points, things I mentioned before, we talk about the Guardian program and there's things that law enforcement is required to do or does as part of our SRO program. They are required for active assailant hostage situation training, the radio interoperability with law enforcement, having that contact with them. CESA requires consultation with law enforcement in certain instances. Lockdown and reunification plans require law enforcement involvement. Law enforcement participates in campus tour recommendations through FSAT. Law enforcement agencies have surveillance camera access as well, so we know that through, again, quicker response time. Also with our new panic alarm system, Strategics, they have that capability now to be notified immediately for a faster response. If the mobile crisis team are not available, this is for Baker Acts. Law enforcement still has the power and capability to do Baker Act if need be and to assist. So again, I want to make sure that we look at everything, we're considering these challenges, and I want to make sure I reiterate, this is a force multiplier. It's not to replace the SROs. That was the question that was proposed. We have a great relationship with our law enforcement agencies. I think we are very fortunate, in my opinion, talking to other school districts, because we are able to have 2 in our high schools and 1 in every school in Lee County. I say that because talking to other school districts and talking to what they deal with by not being able to either provide a SRO in every school, because of the challenges maybe due to cost or due to unable to fill those positions because of the area that they're in. They do use the Guardian program. And I'm not saying a bad thing or negative about the Guardian program, but that's the reality. You look at every school district, each one deals with something differently. And we have a requirement. We have to make sure we maintain that level of expectation. Somebody has to be in our schools, no matter what. So you have to find a way to do that. Now, if we can do a force multiplier, which I won't mention specific school districts, but I will tell you some have, for example, one has 20 schools. They hired 5 guardians to float. So they're not at a school full time. They float, and that's paid by the school district for the salary and benefits. That's paid by them. I will tell you that the retention is high, or attrition's high, because of the requirements they put in place for that position. The salary they're paying, the requirements they must meet. If they can't qualify each year, they have 1 chance to qualify, or they're terminated. So there are requirements that are expectation with a big responsibility to be in that position. So it's a hard, that in itself too is also hard to fill because of the requirements, because of the liability. But again, like I said, every district has their own issues, what they deal with, and I think that's why a lot of times we look at force multiplier or just as a supplement to maybe elementary schools only. A lot of it is based on maybe cost because they can't afford the school resource officer program, or maybe because, again, like I said before, the departments just can't hire enough officers to cover the schools. And that's why I say we're fortunate here that we can have this discussion as a force multiplier, but our schools are covered. So I am open for any questions.
Okay. And I really want to thank you for this presentation. It was very detailed, and I really do appreciate it, but we will go around and get some questions for you. If I may start with Ms. Petrika, Ms. Fisher, Ms. Gittens.
Thank you. So I think my first of all, thank you, Chief, as always. Your presentation makes me reiterate the gratefulness I have for the Sheriff's Department, Cape Coral Police, Fort Myers Police, Sanibel Police, the partners that they are, and the recognition that they and their governing bodies have for the necessity of SROs in our schools. So I can't say enough about my appreciation for that. I think my first comment is for Dr. Savage. What is the temperature in our buildings for employees to accept a Guardian program? And what kind, now I know you don't have the answer, but how can we get that answer? Can we do some kind of a survey? My concern is that based on today's conversation, we're going to see headlines that say Lee County School Board considers arming teachers, when that is nothing close to what we are thinking about doing, nor is it anything close to what was presented here today. So would the implementation of a Guardian program require an education campaign with our staff so that they can better fully understand exactly what it is we're looking at here? And then before I could approve a plan, I would want to know more of the details of the plan. How many guardians are we looking at? In which schools? And some of these questions may have to be answered in executive session or in a shade session, because I understand the safety and security nature of some of this. What is the actual cumulative cost to the district of adding this program to include the liability insurance? I've been asking that question about the insurance for years. What's the temperature of our employees? Cost of additional insurance. When will this come before the board for a final decision? Like,
no, can you please, the reason that this was even brought up is because there was conversations for us to revisit and to speak on this and to get us further information. So that's why Mr. Newland has put this together based on conversations that he has had with representatives or whatnot. So that's why it's back before us again for further conversation, given us I just want to give the background of why we're here with this again.
Yeah, no, I get
Okay.
that, but from my perspective,
Sure.
where I sit, I would need those answers to those questions,
Yeah.
and I'd like a sense for what we're looking at as a time frame. Is this something, if this is something we decide to pursue, are we doing it in 6 weeks, 6 months, a year and a half? Like, what are we looking at for a time frame here? Those are my comments. Thank you.
I don't know if you.
I just want to be frank about this for a minute, and I guess when we look at the Guardian program, and we look at talking about the temperature of employees that may be interested in this program, obviously I mentioned some concerns about that. My big concern about using employees that are already in a position at the school district is it doesn't, to me, if you're going to be a guardian, your sole responsibility should be a guardian. So I'm not sure if we use a pre-existing employment position, what happens to that position? I still feel like we're having to, if that's, again, I mentioned that because if we're going to fill a guardian position, what happens to the old position? Are we talking about creating a whole new position, which is going to be a funding that we don't have for salaries, or are we talking about using a pre-existing position we already have where they'd be doing both duties? I just want to bring that for discussion as well, because to me that's a very important difference.
And if I may, the sense that I get, and correct me if I'm wrong, the sense that I get is that this program was named after Aaron Feist, who was a coach, I think, right? At Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So the point would have been, if he was armed, he would have been able to stop that shooter. So he's an existing employee with existing duties who has the additional supplement. We can call it a supplement because that's something we all can sort of wrap our brains around in terms of teacher plus supplement as a coach. So we would have teacher plus supplement as a guardian. The point is for that existing employee to be able to stop a shooter. And when I think about this, I envision this, I think about somebody like you who's teaching in one of our classrooms, or somebody like our JROTC instructors who have significant background in either law enforcement or military, who would be willing to take this on, and we would be able to trust them to do that. All of that being said, non-law enforcement and non-military employees may have a visceral negative reaction to even them having weapons on campus, not knowing who they are, knowing who they are, whatever. That's where the temperature, I get the separate employee with a separate job description, I don't see that causing problems. But I see that being very cost ineffective to have to hire an entire new class of employees at times 120 schools. Providing a supplement to existing might be more cost effective, but will it cause employees to leave the district because they don't want to work in a building where their colleagues are carrying weapons, right? I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
No, but I'm sure you're taking all that in, because for $500, are you going to do that for $500 for the whole year?
I would think,
Probably not.
I think a hardcore police officer type might, or a hardcore military type might, I don't know.
Well, I just want to bring up one more thing too, and that's why I brought that data is so important, and well, you know, we can still look at everything, but that's why you look at 26 that have the Guardian program, 22 of those have hired, their sole responsibility as a guardian. And I think that's the input I've gotten as well from talking to other districts, that was for that purpose, because there was concern about that. So I just want to bring that up.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry I said.
Ms. Fisher, and then maybe.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
I forgot where I wrote it at.
So one other question, just to piggyback on what you just said about the data. I was wondering if the other districts, when you spoke with them, provided other data regarding incidents and effectiveness, if they have had situations that have already happened, and compared with the professional trained law enforcement officer, what was the effectiveness of the Guardian?
One of the hard parts, and I have a chart I was putting together from talking to all the districts, but one of the things that from talking to them, so the pros and cons. One of the things I mentioned, the benefit was they can set their own policies for those employees, which was very helpful, and that's why that was the benefit. The challenge they have is it's attrition. So if you look at some of the recent of hiring, they may get 180 applicants. I was just reading one today from Broward County, 180 applicants, it went down to 5. Because you have to get through the first phase, and like I mentioned before, you have the psychological, you have the drug screen. So the attrition rate's hard. I was talking to another district up in North Florida a few days ago, and they had let 2 those guardian positions go the other day because they could not pass the qualification. So, for example, now I know we're talking about existing positions, but they've created a position, they've hired employees. So they have to go through the initial training phase, just like I put, when I was the chief in Cape Coral, I would hire somebody at a different rate, put them through the academy. If they don't pass the academy, they don't pass the state exam, they don't pass FTO, I've lost that money, that investment's gone. That's the same problem they're having now in some of these other areas. They have to pay them, they hire them to go through the initial 144-hour training, to go through the psych and other things, and if they have to qualify, and then if they don't, they've made that investment, but they lose that because they can't hire them. They've had some incidents, different things. I mentioned a study in the executive summary, for example. I think it's very important to mention. Now, in that study that I mentioned, there's a lot of different things that have happened. I hate to say it, but firearm I mentioned before, firearm falling out, firearm being left in the bathroom, be left on your desk. That's why I mentioned the uniform, non-uniform thing. That's why it's so important. So if we were going that road again, looking at existing positions, a staff position, should they be in uniform? I think personally, I think they should be. I think everybody needs to know who they are so that they don't think they're an active assailant themselves. So there's been some obstacles with that, but they've had some problem with accidental discharges in schools. That's why it's so important to think about, when I talk about being a standardization of how they carry their firearm, the type of holster, the type of weapons, very important, because the training can't be the same with everybody. And that's just from my background, from what I've dealt with, muscle memory. Not that you don't want it where you shouldn't have it where you can carry the firearm any way you want to. So there's been some challenges with that on school specifics, but I think, again, the biggest thing I think I'm hearing a lot of it is attrition, maintain that level with what they're able to pay them.
So I really appreciate this, and as you were talking and going through your presentation, I was making a list of the benefits versus the challenges, and it sounds like the challenges outweigh really the benefits, especially when it came to the other discussion points where law enforcement is required for so many of the activities regarding an active shooter or an invasion on the campus, et cetera. So our current status right now in Lee County is that it seems to me like we're in pretty good shape because we have a sharing of costs, our schools are covered, we have those professional trained law enforcement officers who really having that, I think, increases the likelihood of sustainability of the program. Right now, we're in a pretty good economy in this area. So I appreciate the opportunity to bring this back to the table and discuss it again. However, I think we really need to take a look at our own current status versus some of those things that have happened in other districts. I mean, you don't want a gun left on a desk or an accidental discharge or something like that. And so I think that that this was an important discussion because it really brought out the fact that we're in good shape now and we are able to afford it. And our partnerships with our local law enforcement, I think, are critical to the safety of our schools and our community, because I think having those officers in the schools on a daily basis gives them access to some intel, and we have definitely have an increasing situation where we have more and more juveniles who need to be in school and not out on the street, for sure. So I think that I appreciate this information, but I think that I'm still looking at the fact that with all the increasing Baker Acts and fights and things at schools, I'm a lot more comfortable with our professional law enforcement being the ones to be there and respond. And then the other thing was the cameras and the radios and the fact that law enforcement has that access to our schools and they know where everything is. And I think that we can locate an invader or an assailant or a student who is not where he should be at that time. So I would like to thank you one more time for this and say that I feel comfortable with our current situation.
Thank you.
And I'm going to, before Ms. Gittens, again, we are, Mr. Newland is bringing this before us because of conversation that has been made, and it was never intended to take away any of the SROs. It was, I believe with the conversation, because I had the same conversation with someone as well, and they were looking to supplement the SROs as additional. But there again, it's the cost and everything else is involved. So it was never to take away. I just want to make sure that that is clear as well. So, but thank you for saying that, Ms. Fisher.
I just have one more question then. So that all being said, have you had any feedback from the SROs and other law enforcement professionals about how they feel about it? Like what's their...
Well, I think it depends on the district as well.
Yeah.
I have a good rapport with our local agencies here from working with them, and we all feel we have a good team here. We all feel very comfortable. There's a good team here working together. I understand. I think the main question comes in is the better in numbers. And that's kind of where it came from, is the force multiplier question.
Right.
And if we were to look at that again, what would be the challenges? But right now, I haven't heard anything from our agencies, but everything's been positive. I think we have a very good relationship with them. I can pick up the phone anytime and talk to them. We've been working very well together, trying to get through any issues we have with the schools. So we're putting together meetings with our principals, trying to kind of help standardize issues and things that may come up in questions as we move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I have about 4 questions. I'll do them quickly. First, I would like for you, we've heard this whole process described as hardening, and we've heard today and in this report, force multiplier. Can you describe the likeness and difference in being a force multiplier and hardening of schools?
Well, there's a belief or a concept, more the better. That's the force multiplier, in my opinion. In my personal opinion, I don't think that's always the case. The more isn't always the better. It depends on who you're talking about. And I don't mean any offense, but as law enforcement, if I'm going to be in the school, those that are working with me as to stop the active assailant, I want them just as trained as I am. And I think it's important, just because you may pass the initial phases of that 144-hour of training does not make you qualified. And you don't know that until you're put in that position. I hate to say that, but I mentioned that study, but for example, as an idea that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, law enforcement does make mistakes, absolutely. But as much as we train, they make mistakes. So you can imagine the level of comparison, and that's part of it. So it's a big commitment. So that's the force multiplier as far as the more of numbers, the better. The hardening, I look at that as more just a person. That's everything. That's your security. That's your hardening. That's what do you have in place for everything as security altogether. You mentioned before, one of our big things we had this year because of Alyssa's law was the panic alarm system, Centegix. And that's been, it's worked out very well. And that's one of we can include our hardening of our schools with that.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to get that out there. Okay, a couple of questions. I agree with Ms. Patrica. If we were looking at making any changes, I would like to see a sample of what it looks like. I personally have always thought if we did it, that a hybrid, especially having the guardians in the elementary schools, it's, to me, I like that idea, but that's just me personally. Okay, is there a time frame or expected expiration, let's say, for the state funds that are available for the Guardian? Is there, I know there's funding out there now, is it, use it or lose it? What is that time frame? Do we know?
From what I've read, there's a timetable when you apply for that, for the Guardian program. I don't want to give you bad information. I believe that time frame for this year is already there. Again, and also that grant, if we were to look at a force multiplier for guardians, that's something that the sheriff would have to support and would have to apply for. So he would have to agree with that program, whatever we were to put together. Let's say we were to decide to do a force multiplier, the sheriff would have to agree with whatever we put together and then apply for that grant, because again, depending on how we put that together, it just depends what it looks like.
Okay, so two more factors are that the time frame for this year is gone, which would be for next year. Am I correct?
I want to verify that. I don't want to give you inaccurate information. I will find out and get the answer back to you.
Okay, so if that is the case, and you're going to check on that, we're looking at not this year, not next year, but the following to do this. And it has to be in conjunction with the sheriff and all of that. So that's something I would also like to know. You mentioned the psychological evaluation, and I kind of grimaced a little under my mask when you said a teacher that couldn't pass the psychological. It's a little bit scary, but is a part of that psychological test, does it address the fact of someone who may very well be a teacher and their willingness to take down one of their own students?
Well, let me clarify something. Right? It's not teachers, it's staff members. So I want to clarify that. So the recommendation to use an employee, it wouldn't be somebody that teaches any students.
Okay, so let's say it's a coach. Would it, and someone like that, or are you talking totally, solely, that's all they do? Because you mentioned different processes. One where there's a person that has a dual job, they're a guardian and they do a job, and then mentioning just doing a guardian. So in the method of a dual job, they obviously have some contact with students. And I'm just saying, would part of the psychological thing be preparing them for that possibility?
The psychological is something similar that law enforcement goes through as well, that you must pass. So, in the same thing, that person takes a psychological exam, and they're already currently employed by the school district. My concern was, and it's a question, because I don't know the answer to this, I've dealt with something similar at the city, if they don't pass the psychological, applying to be a guardian, can't be a guardian, how does it affect that person in their current position?
Right.
And that to me may be a liability issue.
Okay.
Again, I think we have to be researched. I'm not an attorney, but I know when I look at that, that's one of the things that got brought up to me that I looked at when I researched this, that I was concerned about. And that's why, if I mentioned before, that's why a lot of these districts have gone and created their own job description position for this and brought people from the outside.
Hired people in to do it. Okay, next question is, you mentioned about them wearing something or being identified. That's where I was confused, because I thought it was more so of somebody kind of, undercover, so to speak. But you're saying, no, they are visible and everyone knows that they are there and that's their job.
The majority of the ones I showed on the list I gave on the presentation do have identifiers or are in uniform. The ones I spoke to as well also have theirs in uniform. The concern is because they don't want somebody not to know who they are.
In a situation.
And then in a situation and think they're an active assailant and something, God forbid, something happened. There are some locations, however, that do have them as plain clothes. I've seen as much as some wearing even a sash.
Okay.
Or a polo shirt or uniforms, but most of them do have identifier of some type.
I think part of the confusion, too, in the community and amongst people and teachers and all, I mean, you hear all kinds of things. They have a little box, and they have a code, and they have this. I mean, I've heard all the gamut of all types of things. And part of the issue is all of these things that are out there, and people think, oh, they do this and that. So the education of the community and saying this is what it looks like, I think is very important. Last thing I want to say is, I brought this up before, and I know you can't address it necessarily here, but I really would like us to look into if we're having single point entry, some type of metal detectors, and not wanding, because that takes too much. I'm talking about the stand-up ones you just walk through. At least you have one point, and I know the kids will find ways or whatever, possibly to get around it, but at least it kind of has that clearing in the very beginning. It's going to be harder to bring something in, and basically for the middle and the high schools and not elementary. But that's just a thought that I've had, and thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn, and then Ms. G. Finelli.
Yeah, I do not support the Guardian program. The only district employee that I can possibly see as fulfilling the role of a guardian is perhaps somebody who is already a security guard. And you know, my frame of reference really is only in the high school, and the security guards are, you know, letting traffic in and out, especially, you know, during lunchtime when people come and go, and citizens and visitors and all of that. And then, of course, we also have security guards who are there after hours. So that position would be the only positions that I could possibly see, that the security guard would also take on an extra role, and really it makes a lot of sense that a person who's monitoring cars coming in and out, and you know, at lunchtime a lot of the kids leave to go to jobs, etc., and if that person were armed with more than just a radio saying somebody just came in and I didn't admit them, and you know, that might be a game changer. But overall, I'm not in favor of it. And a couple things, it's been mentioned a few times that some school districts, they say, well, no, we don't need SROs in the elementary schools. And I think that SROs in elementary schools play a huge role. Of course, first of all, you got to think one of the first mass shootings in an elementary school. But beyond that, it's about community relationships. So many of our kids live in communities where they see shootings and they see violence. And many of our kids, I know some of the constituents who come here may not be aware of the number of children that we have whose parents are incarcerated and or have seen brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, parents killed. And in many of those cases, the police are not their friend. They learn very early on from the environment they live in. And I think it's so helpful to have, to be building those community relationships with the kids and with the parents as well that come in the building. So that's something, the benefit to the community and at all levels. But that distrust and maybe even hatred of the police, it starts really, really young because of the unfortunate experiences of some of our kids. The other thing, and it's already been mentioned here, we really need to make sure that every single item on our checklist of security, besides people there with guns, the single entries, and that it's not being like, oh, I think I know who that is, I'll just let him in, or you know, things break down, or kids, oh, I know that person, I'll just open a door and let them in, and the see something, say something, all of those pieces, we just really, really need to make sure those are all being enforced. I mean, we've unfortunately hear so many of these school shootings, but, you know, the reality is that there are other dangers coming into the school that are not coming in to have a mass shooting. It might be the dad who's in a custody battle and wants to, it's lunchtime, and grab his kid, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't see that the Guardian system would benefit us that much, and I really, really like the system that we have now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Giovanelli?
Thank you. One of the questions I had regarding your research was the incidents with the mishandled guns. Is that in Florida only, or was that nationally?
No, the information I got was nationally.
Okay, so only 100 nationally.
That one data, that wasn't for, it didn't go that far back, but I was trying to get other recent data, but that's still data they're still tabulating. But just to give you the example, and the main part of that whole thing was to give you the example that, just to show you what can happen. But again, I mentioned earlier, law enforcement made those mistakes too, but it shows you, that's why the training is so important, the constant training to maintain that level.
I agree that the training is very important. In fact, ongoing training, that person would always be training to be prepared. So I agree with you with that exactly. I think the Guardian program is mostly to enhance our SRO program, and we did meet with the sheriff, and he is very supportive of it. So I don't think that that's an issue, and then it kind of come across like that it might be an issue when you spoke about it, and we did meet with him, and he did agree with it. So I think that I want to be clear about that at the table, because I don't think that came across that way. You know, I was thinking, like Ms. Gittens mentioned, like, you know, air marshals are undercover, so I would thought that not knowing who was a guardian would be a deterrent. And I think that I went to an event with Mike Scott was speaking at when he was the sheriff, and that was one of the things right shortly after Parkland, that it's really important that if there's question that someone could be carrying, or, you know, and metal detectors, that's always, you know, going to be a deterrent. So I think we have to think about, you know, what's the price of safety, and I don't think we can put a price on it. So I think it's important to enhance our SRO programs. I know that in our conversation with the sheriff, one of the things that came up was charter schools were the ones that was wanting to use the Guardians, because it would help. You know, it's less expensive than an SRO for them. I understand that, and I think that would be at their discretion at that point if we just chose to do that program, that they could have that option, and that the parents would have the right to decide if that's where they want their child to go. You know, I would probably be a little reluctant, but that's my opinion on that. But I thought that, you know, we have several security positions that are at every school, or all high schools. Why couldn't those positions be guardians? I mean, and I understand right now they're under security, but what is actually their job description? What do they make? And, you know, those are the questions that I had regarding how do we specialize our own securities to security officers that we have and we hire that, like you said, are sometimes they just do the traffic in the mornings and stuff like that. I mean, what are their other jobs, duties during the day? So I would be curious about that. And what else I had? You know, I think the biggest thing when I saw the Parkland explained at one of the FSBA's conferences, they had law enforcement there discussing how if there had been guardians, that they would have saved lives that day. So I think they're the professionals that made up this program. I think we have to really think about that is really important, because this wasn't just because, hey, one day let's have guardians. It was because we had a tragedy that saw the need. You know, it's reactive, unfortunately, than proactive, but I think that's what we need to be, is proactive. And we've had a lot of incidents lately where students are coming to school with guns, and more than one. And so it scares me because they're getting in there. Finally, people are speaking up, but I mean, there's that day that no one knows, and it happens, and I'm in fear of that. One of the things I was curious is, are any of the schools using the guardians for like athletic events? Because we do always have like detail officers at our football games and so forth. Is that something they utilize their guardians, or do you know that answer?
From what I've been told so far, no, only because they're very limited to what a guardian can do. You know, if you think about law enforcement, they can't take police reports, they can't effect arrests, they have to be very careful and get involved in certain things, because technically they are a citizen. They are able to carry a gun to stop active assailants. So that's been a big kind of a controversy with some of the districts. I will tell you that, you know, they've been asked to do certain things they can't do. So that's kind of an obstacle a little bit. That's why they still need law enforcement for certain things, and that's why, you know, it's. I mentioned before about elementary, maybe having guardians only in middle and high school. That's even been a problem for some districts, because the perception sometimes from the parents is, well, is my child not as important because you have guardians at elementary, but the middle and high school get the officer. So that's just the perception, not saying any differently, but that's just the perception. So there are some things you have to, obstacles you have to deal with this.
Also, when I think of guardians, though, I think of like retired law enforcement or military and stuff like that. Do you have any data on, like, because I would think maybe someone that still has their license, like my husband, that when he retires, his license will be active for X amount of time. You know, he could be a guardian and still renew his law enforcement license.
I can provide you, this is a job description from the Broward County School District. They hire, their guardian programs are outside employees they hire. They have a job description. Must have, say, earned an associate's degree in an accredited institution, a minimum of 4 years with the last 10 years of experience in sworn law enforcement or corrections or military. Prior experience in law enforcement in a K-12 setting. So those are some of the requirements they are looking for a guardian program. And again, these are outside, not pre-existing positions.
Yeah, so I mean, I would feel comfortable that that person would be, you know, a very qualified guardian. I think that the ongoing training, like you said, is really key, because that's really important. So I think that's all I had in my notes. I was looking, but I was just curious about some of the research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, I think I'm the only one who hasn't weighed in. So first of all, thank you for the executive summary. Thank you for all of the research you did. You provided a lot of information. It was very helpul. I'm comfortable with the current security profile, SROs, K-12. I think if we were to do, I think I liked your comment, Ms. Vaughn, about making certain that we understand what all of the other levels of prevention, identification and prevention are, that families understand what they are, and it's not just about the SROs in the schools, it's about everything else, the threat assessment teams, everything else that we're doing in the schools that provides families with the sense that we are really responsible for the safety of their kids. If we were to explore anything, it would, from my point of view, it would be the security people that we have. I'm not, frankly, at this point, interested in doing more than that. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And go ahead, Ms. Fisher.
One small thing. Kathleen, when you said that, I was thinking and made some notes here that we are doing a lot of things in our school to create a climate and culture where kids do feel safe and they're not ticked off at somebody and they don't want to shoot or fight with people. And I think that our PBIS schools and our restorative practice and all of that, the more that we enhance that and the more buy-in we get, I think the less likely we are to have some of those incidents, you know, in the school. And then, of course, the research shows that a lot of the assailants were students. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can in that respect to create that climate. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I've heard is that some want more information regarding the temperatures of, or the climate of the school, how they would feel about it. Data regarding incidents, let's see, what else? And I don't know if we have like the sizes of the districts who do have the, who have guardians versus who do not have guardians, might be good. And then the guardian grant, the funding is available for the sheriff, and that covers XYZ, which, so they are the ones who get the $500 stipend to pay all these, those who would come aboard. That would go to the sheriffs. Would the Cape have to do that, apply for that, and would Fort Myers PD, who are also in our schools, or is it just the sheriff?
Just the sheriff. The sheriff would have to, whatever program would have to be, we would present, for example, the sheriff would have to agree with that program. He would have to then apply for that grant funding for the guardian, which would cover, again, the operating expenses for the guardians, but that would just be the sheriff, would fall under the sheriff, not Cape Coral or Fort Myers.
So what would happen with them then, the Fort Myers and Cape?
Well, again, we're talking about force multiplier, so you still have our current SRO program. That shouldn't, that's not going to affect that. We're not getting rid of that. We're talking about adding
right
over and beyond that. So that's a separate funding. The allocation funding we get separate from the grant.
Okay, perfect. And then, what was it? And then ongoing training, that would be above and beyond. That's not part of the grants, because I don't see that in the grant.
Right. We have to make sure through working with the grant, whether through the sheriff, that whatever training that would be agreeable, and it's really, the sheriff have to agree to that would the grant cover those costs, ongoing training.
And I think there was just one more thing. There's a lot that you covered. I just really think that there's a lot of good information here, and I really appreciate it. And I do appreciate our SROs, and I think it's vital that we make sure that we let them know how much we appreciate it, because they check on the kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that what's going on in the schools. They have conversations with those kids who need to have the conversation, and they learn a lot from the kids. So I do appreciate this. And then I guess if we could get that other more information.
Absolutely.
That would be great as well. Mr. Preborno?
Mr. Nealon, I just have one other question, if you can add to the list. What would be the position of the Fort Myers Police Department and Cape Coral if we had a Guardian program? Would they feel at this point that we are being serviced by the Guardian program and they don't have to provide the SROs from their agency? So I think that's important for us to know that too.
Thank you, that's what.
And Sanibel.
Exactly.
And Sanibel.
And again, just for clarification, as a force multiplier, but you want to make sure, as would the feeling be, would they no longer needed?
Sometimes I know that some of the agencies are questioning, the cost and their involvement, so I want to make sure that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
okay. Well, one more thing, and then we're going to the next.
I mean, it is important for us to recognize the financial commitment that Cape Coral and
Fort Myers and Sanibel.
county commissioners make, because they do get political pushback on providing this to us.
Yeah.
But they're putting safety and security and community relations ahead of that political pushback, and they are prioritizing this for us. So I agree, if it's going to take away from that perception at all, then that's a dangerous step to take.
Absolutely. I'll look into that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we haven't made it through the workshop. Now we are on the good of the order.
Madam Chair, before we start, I do have a 4 o'clock hard stop.
I think we all do. Yeah. We're all trying to make sure we do that. So we're going to start with, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to start with the good of the order, and I'm going to start by reading my quote. And the quote is, "Maturity is the ability to think, speak, and act your feelings within the bounds of dignity. The measures of your maturity is how spiritually you become during the midst of your frustration." Samuel Yeoman. And I'm going to go around and I'm going to ask all of you how you've changed this, or how you feel about the quote.
Can you just give me a minute? I'm trying to find mine.
I want to go with you. Okay, Ms. Vaughn.
I'm sorry. I only speak.
And all you did was read the quote. You didn't tell us about you.
I know, but I'll come
Put it in
back,
your words.
I'll come
No,
back.
what's yours?
I'll come back to me. First, I'm reading this, and then we're going around, and
That
then I'll
wasn't the
come back.
instruction, though.
That was my instructions.
Oh, you were supposed to start it.
My instruction was to read this and then ask all of you, and then come back to me.
Really?
That's-
I didn't understand
I am-
that way. Okay.
see, I checked to make sure I was doing what I was instructed. So, Ms. Vaughn,
You want me to respond to the quote, your quote?
yes. How you would put this?
Two things. First of all, measure how spiritual you become. I don't know about that. Frankly, the whole maturity thing, I could be a little flippant about it and just say that for me, at my age, if I haven't learned how to be mature, it's not happening. I don't,
I
think
believe
they're
the instructions were to put it in your own words. So
put it in
if
my
the
own words,
maturity
that's
word-
about it.
It sure is.
I'm serious. You want
Ms. Vaughn,
good, the
I
bad, and the
accept
ugly,
that.
and it's no reflection on Chair Jordan,
I
but
accept that, but this was not my quote. I did not create this quote. I'm just letting you know. I'm
Samuel
reading
did.
it as well. So,
Samuel, who is that?
yeah, I did not read this. I mean, I did not make this quote up. It was given to me to read, so, but I do
Well,
accept,
who
I
did
accept
it, and
this.
who is Samuel Ullman?
I have no earthly idea. But I do thank you for your comments. Ms. Fisher.
So when I looked at this quote, I thought to myself, I had a flashback of when I was a school counselor, and we had a way of having people take responsibility for themselves, respect themselves, and respect others. So that's what this kind of made me think about. And I think the spiritual part is like, how many times do you say to yourself, God help me, because this can't be happening? And
Well, I don't
you know,
say it
maybe
exactly in
stepping out
that
a little bit.
context, but
So, you know, we are responsible for ourselves. We are all mature, or, well, we are all adults, and we are educated, and we have taken an oath of office and agreed to comply with some ethical behavior. And I think it's just that it's all about your own self-control, in my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. That was lovely. Ms. Giovanelli.
Okay, well, I'm going to be quick and easy. I broke it down to what my thoughts, because it was, in your own words, say basically the same thing, right? So I understood this to say, the skill to look through the eyes of others and respond with respect, acceptance, even when it's not your own thoughts. The ability to accept someone that has differences with grace and mercy in the middle of opposition. The ability to navigate through a disagreement with an open mind. So there's mine.
Wow, I think I'll borrow yours. I liked yours. That was good. Ms. Patrica.
Maturity is not about age. It is about understanding that all of our weaknesses cannot be eliminated. Rather, maturity is about understanding the life experiences that shape our perception, decreasing the impact of past wrongs on current thinking and behavior, and dealing with new wrongs swiftly so as to process and move past them more quickly.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. Ms. Gittens.
Okay. I have, oops. In my opinion, the quote means, "You cannot give away what you do not have. If you think, speak, act, and articulate that you are better than others in a room, you have, in my opinion, exceeded the bounds of dignity and respect for self and others. The measure of maturity is the way you handle difficult situations. Are you gracious or confrontational? Is the goal to get your way or collaborate and find common ground? Do you open up and look for different solutions or cut off any thoughts that are not like yours?"
Thank you. Ms. Morgan.
So I really didn't write anything down because my immediate reaction to this was, this is essentially the golden rule. You don't respond to people the way they have communicated with you. You respond in the way that you wish to be addressed or communicated with. So, okay, I'll make my confession tomorrow when I do my presentation tomorrow, but that's basically
Thank you.
what I think it is.
And when I'm looking at this, and I wrote something, but I apologize, I don't have it with me, but when I'm looking at this, I don't know if the way you measure maturity is spiritual as well. I just believe that before you open your mouth, before you act, when you're thinking, make sure that you are considering the people around you, who you're speaking to, what's coming out of your mouth, because that does reflect upon you. And I just always think about what I always, to my own kids and my grandkids, all of this, the way we act and what words we use, words matter. So we need to make sure that we have to represent what comes out of what we speak, and I show it better than I can speak it. Unfortunately. He's not part of ours. I'm sorry, we're excluding you.
I did draw a visual of what I.
Did you want to draw a visual? Can you share your visual with us?
I drew a visual model of what I kind of
Please.
interpreted that to be. And I know I wasn't supposed to be part of it, but I couldn't help as I was kind of reflecting.
Go
on it.
ahead, show us your picture.
So essentially, it's like a big triangle. It's a maturity triangle. So you start with the very lowest and up to the greatest amount, and it's very immature at the top and very immature at the bottom in terms of your frustration level being the vertical axis, spirituality being the horizontal axis, and then dignity being that sweet spot of that in between of where you are essentially able to demonstrate an appropriate level of spiritual maturity. But you haven't been pushed quite to your highest frustration level, your lowest, so that's kind of the optimal level, so.
Great drawing.
Yeah, thank you.
Great drawing, thank you. And the reason we're doing this is for those who are watching and think that we've lost it, we are going through, we will be going through some training, so this is just part of everything moving forward to our upcoming training. So back to good of the order. I would like to, I'll go last. Go ahead, Ms. Gittens.
Oh, you're just consistently going to make me go first. Okay. It goes between me and Ms. Giovanelli all the time, so I'll take it off of you today. Okay. I have a couple of things, and one in particular, and I'll bring up some other stuff tomorrow. When we receive the end of the week updates, and let me say first of all, if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off and not bow, but just accolades and give claps for the people, the staff that prepares our weekly updates. I can't even imagine the monumental task of putting all that information together. And in saying that, and I'm going to go back, and I know there's going to be pushback, but I look at all of the information that we receive as public record. Whether it's in an email or whether it's somewhere else on the computer, it is public record. I personally could particularly benefit from having some type of a Google document that has tabs, that has each of the topics that we deal with, so that each week that information would go in there. If I want to go back at this point and find out something that was in a report 3 weeks ago, I literally have to go page by page in emails. It is a daunting task, of which I really, honestly don't have time to do. I find it challenging to me to ask a question and someone to say, well, it was in the report on June the 3rd, 2020. You knew about it. It is really, really difficult. I'm thinking as well in the future, down the line, new people joining the board, we all won't be here forever. Looking at the process, to have a process that is simplistic, that if it was something about vacancies, then we can go to this document, click on vacancies, and it's just plugged in there. We can look back and see it. I think that it would be simplistic for us to find information, to make sure we haven't missed information, to go back if we need to, and possibly simplistic for staff to just plug in one place all the information. It's just, I find it very daunting and overwhelming to just get this huge amount of all this information that is not organized in any specific way. Nothing against staff. You give us a wonderful amount of information. It's just overwhelmingly unorganized.
Ms. Morgan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I got to jump on that because I actually have something very similar in my board member comment, and that is that we got a lot of data, but no context, which is really what Mrs. Gittens is saying. That we have, my comment was, I think I even sent an email to Dr. Carlin, saying, you know, we get these data dumps, but effectively, if you don't tell me how it compares to where we were a year ago or where we were a quarter ago, the percentage of kids who are not in school or the percentage of staff who are out, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
So I absolutely agree that data is good, but we've got to have a way that provides context for us when we get it. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gittens, for bringing that up.
Thank you. It's just something that really has been, it's very difficult to even just keep up with. So I would like to throw that out. There was one other thing and I can't find where I put it, so I will bring it up tomorrow. And thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Morgan?
Ms. Gittens took mine.
I'm sorry.
She did? Okay, Ms. Vaughn. Anything for good of the order for today?
Something that I wanted to point out, maybe all of you heard it this morning, that General Colin Powell passed away today, and I have been looking at some of the quotes and trying to find, actually, I need to find a speech that he made. I think there was a speech that he made about education, and I need to find that. And I've just been, since we are talking about leadership here, I've been perusing his many quotes, very, very insightful quotes about leadership. And the one I was going to say that I just found, I lost it, but this one, if you're going to achieve excellence in big things, you develop the habit in little matters. So maybe that's my quote for the day. And I know I personally really admired the man, and I feel like he was 84, and I feel like he's one of that generation of he did get into politics, although I never saw him as a politician, as much as a statesman. And quite a few years ago, FGCU had a program, I don't know if any of you had the benefits of this, where they invited really important speakers in. And my daughter was a student at that time, and so she invited me to go with her. And so I did hear him speak at FGCU. Gosh, it's got a 10 or way long time ago. Did anybody else go to that or remember it?
Yeah.
He was just charismatic in person. So I feel like he's one of the great ones that is gone, and he rose above many of the things that we as a community, as a state, as a nation, are no longer finding ways to rise above. And so I am going to find his speech that he gave on education that I haven't found yet. And also, I just advise myself and all of you to look at the various things he says about leadership. I think they're very appropriate. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, so first of all, I want to share that I found that Samuel Ullman was an American businessman, poet.
Thank you.
Humanitarian and religious leader, and he was best known for his poem on youth. And the quote from that was, "Youth is not a time of life, it's a state of mind." So then I was going to share my top 10 reasons to be a school board member. So I'll start from 10 and go down to the
Did you
top
make
one.
these up or these?
No, this was a book that someone gave me when I first got on the board. And
Okay.
it's called The Essential School Board Book, but I've used this from time to time. Number 10, because I really like to sit on hard chairs for extended periods of time. 9, because there are very few foods I don't enjoy, or at least won't eat. Oh, you always save me, thank you. 8, because I enjoy being at numerous evening events. You might have a problem if your spouse enjoys you being at these events. 7, because I like a challenge. 6, because educators made a real difference in my life. 5, because I have the gift to listen, hear, and understand positions that are different from my own. 4, because I have the ability to be ardent in my beliefs or opinions, but also the ability to compromise when necessary. 3, because I want our children and young people to be successful in school, and I don't care who gets the credit. 2, because I realize that every child has the ability and right to be as good of an education as we can provide. And 1, because I believe I can make a difference in the education of children. Thank you.
That was really nice, Ms. Fisher. Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, I just have a couple things, and that, it's actually for the superintendent. One of the things I said I was going to bring up was the masking of being optional for staff, so if you could update us on that. That's one thing, and then another thing, it's been brought to my attention that the Island Coast High School, I guess kids cross a certain area of the street, and there's like no school crossing or no signs.
Circle.
Yeah, and so the parents are feeling that it's a safety issue, and I don't know exactly, it's not anything but I know it's something we need to probably check out. But that made me think, well, I don't recall seeing a school crossing at Gateway High School, and I may be wrong, but I don't recall it, and it might be somewhere I just missed it, and as well as Bonita High School, but I'm not sure either. So I'm thinking maybe it's something more with the county, and, because who does the signs? Do we?
Space limit.
So I didn't know if that's something that, I don't even know who would address that, but that's just a couple things on that. And that's all I have, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
And, okay, and I have a few. Okay, first of all, did everybody bring their pictures? I have a slew of pictures up here of why I am here and why I do what I do every day. So you're welcome to see my pictures. I will change them on a daily basis.
And the facilitators are requesting that you bring your pictures to every meeting from now until the actual training begins. And keep it at your seat at the dais or here at the workshop table.
And I literally had to run and...
Be on your phone.
Yes, I literally had to run and go print some out today because I forgot we don't have pictures anymore that we actually carry with us. Also, Everybody did receive the final version. Please make sure that you look at it, the final version of the brochure that Molly had sent to us from Ray and Associate. They sent that out. I want to make sure that you did see that. If Mr. Lee, David Lee, has sent me an email and asked, are we going forward or we're not? Because we had conversation that we wanted to do that. And then there was the question about how do they know what we're doing or feeling with masks on our face? And he did send a response to that because of the body language. So that was sent out to everyone. So I just need to, because he was scheduled to watch our meeting tomorrow. So I just need to let him know if in fact he is still doing that or he is not doing it, because I was instructed that he was at first. So I just want to, before I send him another email, to say, yes, I'm asking you all, is this something that we would like to? And Mr. Lee is a gentleman from FSBA that we had, most of us had seen, that he watches the board meetings, and then he, one-on-one with the board members, he will have conversations with you to, to speak to you. Hey, do you think you should have rolled your eyes? Hey, do you think you should have said this? Hey, do you think you should have leaned a certain way? He's there to assist and to build you up, to make us better board members. So I just need to know what the wishes are of the board. So, Ms., you have a question?
Yes, I do. I mean, I am for it because I believe that the intent of our words comes out not only in the words themselves, but the intonation of our words, and it is very easily seen on this board.
Thank you. And Ms. Patrica, you said you're for it?
I had a question.
And Ms. Vaughn?
Okay, we have quite a few days set aside for the pre-reorg, and Ms. Dupree-Bruno just referred to the facilitators, and I just am not sure, what kind of overlap are we going to have with this?
Actually, to me, if the gentleman, if he watches Tuesday, which is tomorrow, prior to all the training that we're going through, that may tell a different story, how we are today versus how we will be.
That's not what I'm asking, though.
I'm asking how's it?
I'm asking.
He's not here. He's watching us.
No, it's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, with our reorg, you, Ms. Dupree-Bruno, you referred to facilitators, and you're already having us do little projects and homework and all of that. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this, but how much of this are we going to be doing is the not nice way to say it. It's just the frank way. I mean, how many different angles is this coming at us from? Which is a preposition at the end.
I think Mr. Lee is to be able to give some guidance as to the board's body language, communication, and things of that nature in terms of watching. I will tell you that the facilitators are also watching. And how much are you going to do is really about how much of a commitment that the board has to improve itself and move itself forward.
And
the last meeting.
Who are these people?
Oh, well.
Well, Mr. Lee, I believe you were at the conference.
I know who Mr. Lee is. I saw that, but we keep hearing about facilitators and all.
November 5th, it will be the first time that you actually get to meet the facilitators. And it's going to be work. I mean, it's going to be rolling up your sleeve and really making a commitment to how this board is going to move forward. And the reason is that the board is at a point where it is very difficult for you as board members to do your job, because there's just so much, you can't do your job because you're having a lot of a hard time. And it's also getting to the point where I, as your board attorney, am having a difficult time doing my job. In addition, I'm watching the board's interactions on the dais expose us to liability, and I'm concerned about the risk management. And I believe it's also very difficult for the superintendent and staff to do their jobs. So at this point, it's time, if the board, because this is all about you, if the board is willing to do the work, one-day training is not enough. The board has to be willing to roll up its sleeve and do the work to improve itself so that you can do your job. I think you guys were earlier today talking about principals setting the culture in their schools and finding out why we're not retaining. It's the same thing with the board.
Right, and also it's to make us better, not just for our own being, but for the staff, for the public, for everybody, community. I think that, we do owe it to them.
So, okay, so Mr. Lee is not yet a part of this, but he would become a part of the overall board improvement program in addition to these unknown facilitators that.
Yes, I was
Chair
instructed.
Jordan,
I was instructed by you all.
Do you know of the details of our facilitators?
For
this
upcoming? No, I do not.
Okay.
But what I do know is that Mr. Lee, I was instructed by you all to contact him, which I had. So I did what I was asked to. Then you all asked me to ask him, what does that look like? Which I did. And I brought that back to you again. So now I'm just trying to let this man know by tomorrow, because it's just common courtesy to let somebody know, yes, we would like for you to do this, or no, we would not. So I just need you all to give me the answer. And Ms. Patrica said yes. You have a question?
No, I wanted to say, and I may be repeating something I've already said or you already know, but the point of the individual feedback is exactly that, individual.
It's individual.
He gave the example of somebody wearing reading glasses, and every time he looked up, he looked like he was looking down his nose at his colleagues, and his colleagues took offense to that. So the feedback he gave was take your glasses off when you speak, and within 6-8 weeks, the dynamics on the board got better just from removing glasses. And so that's the kind of feedback that I'm hoping, I've said this to you guys a million times, take the Chris out of what it is I say at the table. If he can help me take the Chris out of it, then I think he's worth $1 million.
So, okay, so Ms. Patrica is agreeing behind it, Ms.
Don't tell him
Gittens?
I said that about the $1 million.
I would not. Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Vaughn?
Live with it.
Okay. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, because we never see ourselves as others see us.
Very true. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Giovanelli?
My only concern is we've done this before. We've been to this, we've been here, done that, and we're back again. So, I mean, I'm hopeful, and it's the will of the board. I will do my best again.
Well, this certain gentleman, he has one, and I believe you seen that presentation, so it's one-on-one. It's not a whole presentation to all of us. He contacts you, and he helps you build on yourself. So it's.
And not to change the subject real quick, but when was Molly supposed to have sent that? Because I'm looking for it.
It just came.
Oh, okay.
So it appears to be that we have the majority for me to call him, so I will be reaching, well, we have the majority. You and Ms. Vaughn can live with it. The rest of us, I'm sorry, Ms. Giovanelli, you said you're okay with this?
Yeah. I mean, I can live with it too, so. I
Okay,
mean, I'm
so
gonna-
4-3. So I will go ahead and contact him after this meeting and tell him thank you and to join us, watch us tomorrow evening. And then he'll be contacting you individually and working with you. Let's see what else.
And everybody's going to be on their best behavior tomorrow.
Well, you know what? Then if that's what it takes for people to be on their best behavior, then we'll have somebody watch every week. That's all I have to say about that.
May I make a comment?
And then I have one last thing to say, that please, there's articles. Mr. Pre-Bruno had given articles to read, so if everybody would read those articles for tomorrow, so you have that. Ms. Gittens, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Pre-Bruno, please.
Okay, I would be remiss not to remind you all that in the other trainings we had, the trainers did take the time to have individual calls and contact and conversations with each of you prior to their trainings. So the reason I'm kind of on the fence about it is that we have had this process before. It did not make a difference. So I can only hope that it would, but I'm just saying, we have done the same process previously, if you recall.
And I'm just going to correct that one. This one is different because they are watching you, watching us, then they will, because I've never had those conversations that you just spoke of, but they are watching us, and then they will contact you, and you can get as much information that you want from him or as little as you want. It's all up to us on how we take this in and what we do for ourselves. Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, and I just want to comment. I'm sure he's very, very good. I mean, there are people that specialize in body language and all of that. However, what he doesn't have access to is, frankly, things from behind the scenes, things that we know have happened, and I mean, there's a whole other story behind some of the responses and reactions we have, and that's, you know, that's something that's extremely hard to, I mean, it's impossible for him to know unless he gets backstories on things.
Ms. Morgan?
Do you want to go first?
So, Ms. Vaughn, I think that Mr. Lee is a complement to what you're going to be experiencing since last Friday through the 12th, because the individuals that are facilitating will have all of the backstories, because part of this is going to be looking at the root causes. You got to look at the root cause so you can know how you can move forward. So that's all going to be addressed, but this is a complement in terms of what is the public seeing when they're looking at you on the days and how you're moving forward with your business. So it does kind of tie in hand.
Okay.
Ms. Morgan?
So I will just say that tomorrow I'm responsible for presenting an article, and I will be ripping off my own Band-Aid. So just so you know.
Thank you. Mr. Pre-Bruno?
I have about 13 minutes. Not sure if I'm going to be able to do what I needed to do in the 13 minutes, so I think I would like to wait till tomorrow, because I need to go through a couple of statutes, and I wanted to give an example. So if I may have time first thing during the briefing or at some point during the briefing, I need about 15 minutes.
Yeah, we'll figure out a time.
Thank you.
That works best for you.
And then I just wanted to have also consensus from the board with recommendations. One of them is to have an attorney tip at every briefing, in the beginning of the briefing, for about 15 minutes, just to talk about maybe a tip on a parliamentary procedure or a tip on a protocol or a reminder on a statute, something along those lines, so if I can see where the board is with regards to that request.
Fine with it.
Well, can I, just to make a comment as somebody who's been for almost the past year now facilitating those meetings, I think that's great, except we have to make sure that the correct time is built in to those agendas, because we've had so many times where when I get the agenda, and remember, I don't see the agenda ahead of time, I don't have input into that, I add up the time, just the basic time for the presentations, and then not knowing how many community members are going to be present for comments, not knowing the length of time board members are going to need. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, it really, whoever puts together that timing on these has to be aware of exactly how much time you need, so we don't have these meetings where at 20 till 6 we're finishing up what we're doing, gobbling down something, because certainly that doesn't make for for our next meeting going as smoothly as it could possibly go. So
and
that's
maybe-
just a general statement about, let's do our planning so that we have plenty of time for public comment, for board member questions, comments, et cetera. Because that's the meeting that's unlike some of the others. Like today, it's hard stop. People have stuff to do. But that's a meeting that always precedes our action meeting. And so it's another whole issue.
So maybe, Mr. Pre-Bruno, you'll do it on a workshop, because if we take 3 minutes per person, that's 21 minutes per whatever that is. So, and Ms. Vaughn, you pretty much keep it at the 3 minutes. I know here, people tend to, because I've been timing it all day, and people extend that. So if you're giving them the 3 minutes to speak at the 21 minutes per whatever, we can time that out differently. But if you need to do that on a different a workshop versus whatever, we'll make that happen if they want the tip.
So the other thing is because there's one workshop a month, which is really supposed to be dedicated to the board for board development and board topics. What I wanted to request from the board is that there is at least 1 hour dedicated in that workshop for a board development type of training or activity. Once a month.
And maybe you could do the tip on that.
I could do
That day, so that doesn't interfere with the 21 for the minutes. Ms. Patrica?
May I ask that you just exercise discretion? Like, if it's been a super long day and it's been hard, then, like you did now with the 13 minutes, you said you need 15, and you'll put it off to another time. So exercise discretion, you can get the temperature of the room. And can you please make them fun? No, I'm being serious. Like,
The workshop, so there's two things. I can exercise discretion with regards to the briefing, depending on what it is, and we can also work with staff in terms of fixing the agenda and adding the time. I'm not too worried about that. But with regards to the workshop, we will try to make it fun, but I would recommend to the board that you're going to have this intense training. It's going to end on November 12th. And then after that, you can't forget everything that you've just learned and what you're trying to put into practice. So it's important to have the continuous board development every month.
no, I mean, like, if you're gonna give us an update or a reminder on parliamentary procedure, that can be about as boring as life gets, but if you use like an outrageous example that makes it light, then it won't, you know what I mean? Like, it's just-
Ethics training. How they
make
do
it
ethics
fun.
training. Make
I'll
it
do
fun.
my best to make it fun. I'm a lawyer. I'll try my
understand, but like,
best.
instead of using the example of, I make a motion to build yellow school playground equipment.
That's my standard.
I know, I make a motion to serve Harry Potter booger flavored,
I understand.
jelly beans in the cafeteria. I know Melissa wants them to be vomit flavored. Like, that's more fun, right?
All right, so I will do
Those
my
with
best.
strong
So-
stomachs.
But before I want to make sure that I have the board's directive to do those two things. Just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Thumbs up, guys,
with the
everybody?
time considerations.
Yes. Okay, and Dr. Savage.
Absolutely. I'll try to be very quickly here. Just as a quick note, the safety issue related to Island Coast, the crossing area, Gateway High, Bonita High, Mr. Newland and safety staff will get an answer with your board weekly. I just wanted to kind of respond to the Google Doc with the tab categories. That, I think, I love the idea of trying to, here's the thing, it takes considerable staff time to produce responses, to research, there's so much work that goes into this. The idea that and I just couldn't agree more that having, emails you have to go back and find, and then how do you cross-reference it, and how do you look those answers up? Sometimes we might answer a question 6, 7, 8 times, and it's the same one, and they have to go back and try to find. So to make it more user-friendly and respectful of the work that staff has done to produce it, I'm very happy to have that problem, because I think that's a wonderful idea. And then we'll use hyperlinks wherever possible to make it easy. We'll work on that, and I think that would be wonderful. I also just had to draw out the data without context. That is like a page out of my heart, because I got to tell you, people are probably tired of me saying it. I haven't used the term data dumps, but I am it's a big pet peeve when I get these numbers in isolation. It's like, there was no point of even giving me the data, because I can't do anything with this, or even plotting it in a visual, historically, longitudinally, any of those things, they're just so important. So just thank you both for those pieces. We'll strive to improve that. Just wanted to answer on the medical educational panel. So we essentially had that group. They had one meeting already, and then again, they're convening this Wednesday. Now, just to kind of give some context, that group, that includes experts from Lee Health, Golisano Children's Hospital, FSU, Lee Physicians Group, North Cape Pediatrics, FGCU, our Curriculum Instruction Group, Professional Development, and our ESE department. Now, the goal of that team really is to create a tiered matrix, and that really determines when we ramp up and conversely when we relax all of our mitigation protocols. I recognize that the one that everyone cares about is masking, but that really is just one of them. But it's all in conjunction of that. So at the first meeting, which was very important to level set, we had to come to agreement of what was the right metric to use to make all these decisions. In spite of the fact that masking is important, what are you basing your decision on truly is the most important thing. And so that it was unanimously decided that the community transmission level would be the data that we would use to initiate this matrix. So just to reiterate what that is, it's really made up of two pieces of data. One is the positivity rate, and two, the number of new cases per 100,000 persons in the past 7 days. So just right now in Lee County, the current positivity rate, which you've probably heard fluctuate in these low numbers, 5.43%, which is a wonderfully low number. The case rate is still high, 72.54. What that places Lee County is in what's called the substantial transmission category. So it's important to know that the community transmission is basically separated into 4 levels: low, moderate, substantial, and high. And so for us, that target currently being in the substantial, that's based on the case rate, whereas the positivity rate is lower. Now, that panel is currently reviewing and ranking all of our COVID mitigation strategies to really determine at what level should that strategy be in play based on that community transmission rate. So masking is that one. Preliminary information we received from that panel definitely seems to indicate that during high and substantial transmission, that masking would be required. However, certainly it should be optional during low transmission, where we'll have conversation is really in that moderate range. And that's really where we want to make sure we get all of the medical responses on that piece. And that group, again, will be Wednesday, though we do have preliminary data on that. And then just as a hard stop, because one of the things I recognize, even though these numbers, we can always do a better job communicating this. Always. There's just never, we recognize this is very hard for people. And the number one question I get asked around the staffing side of this is, of course, when are the masks coming off? And I think sometimes it's really important. We don't want to rush the experts in their work. However, we also recognize this is the number one thing that is being asked. I've charged that group. This question must get resolved first at that meeting on Wednesday. And so they're going to be looking into that. We will have a decision, because there's, again, fallout from the decision either way on those pieces, no later than Friday, October 22nd, which is this Friday. If earlier, then earlier. However, we just want to make sure whatever we do, we also have communication with our principals, all the implications of whatever we're doing, do it right, do it thoughtfully. I can assure everyone, we are not doing this to, be autocratic. It is strictly trying to respect the work of our experts. We've convened them to do this charge, but I do recognize masking is a unique conversation point.
So would that be, because I know that, I think it was the last meeting, we had said that they were meeting, and then we would get back with them, so that's already been, 2 weeks? Since we've told them that we were going to get back to them, so I really think that that's something that we have to, and I think that was for optional, for the teachers or staff to be optional, and that was 2 weeks ago at our board meeting. because we're going to meet, or you all were going to meet on that Wednesday, and then we were going to have some respond back regarding the optional. So I just want to make sure, because that's 2 weeks, and now we're looking at another 2 weeks?
No, it's this
Another
Friday.
week?
We're
Oh, this
planning
Friday,
on
okay, so
by
that'd
this
be
Friday
3
at
weeks.
latest. Again, if we can have it earlier, it's just they are meeting Wednesday. This is their top order, is to get the masking piece. It's more complicated than what I'm giving you. It has to do with how long the data has been cycled, if it's been for 2 weeks. There's a lot of other pieces to this, but those are the two most important data points that I just wanted to highlight. That's really what the decision will be rooted on.
Because I believe that this number is lower than it was even last year.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah, this number's come way down.
Yeah.
We didn't have.
Yeah, I
Ms.
think I read
Fisher?
like 45 in the hospital, so 45
Yeah.
people. It's like a low.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if there was any discussion in that regard for removing masks when people are speaking. Like if someone's at the microphone over there, can they take their masks off so that they can be better heard? Because people, it's muffled, and there are a lot of people, including myself, who have a difficult time hearing everything clearly that's being said. And then I didn't know how that would apply to classroom teachers if they are, standing 6 or 10 feet away from the students, and then the students could see their expressions and especially with the younger kids, because it's really difficult for them to be developing their language.
Removing them when they are speaking, just their reaction to that question as well.
Because I think that most people have already removed them when they're speaking here. A lot of them do that already to make sure that they can be heard.
Yes.
So I think that's been an ongoing thing forever.
That's the worst time.
Yeah, all the time. So,
It makes no sense.
But you have
You
social
just have to
distance.
enunciate
right.
and speak loud.
Well,
Teachers know how to
Dr.
do
Savage,
that.
did you have one
Just one
more?
last thing.
Dr. Savage still has the floor.
One last
All right.
piece, and this is just, so the high school principals, I had what I guess I could probably describe as an intervention. I don't know how else to describe it, where I sat down with the high school principals. They, as a level, their jobs are very difficult. They are the principal over very large schools. I mean, they're microcosms of our community, very difficult jobs to lead and manage in that environment. And so they, as a group, as an association, sat down with me and they wrote us a letter. And they gave me the discretion of how I bring this letter to you as a board. And so my thought was to bring it as part of our reorganization. But I wanted to kind of just prime you that really what their big question essentially, and you can read their words, was essentially how can they support us as being one team? And it kind of highlights a little bit of what you were saying, how it's difficult for all of us to do our jobs. It can be very difficult for them to do their jobs if we as an entirety don't kind of own the fact that we are one team. We all have different ideas, we have different thoughts and everything, but we are one district, and they are the district. We are the district. I am the district, you're the district, we're all the district. We're all one team. And so it's really important for them to feel as if they have the opportunity to, how can they support us? They want to support us as a governance team. So what can that look like? So that we feel like they are a part of our team and they are a part of our team. How can we do that together? What does that look like? And I thought it was wonderful that they were willing to offer to support in kind of whatever conception we want. But it just, I think the mutuality of that was strictly to say, if we're one team, then let's kind of give each other a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in how we conduct with each other, so that they don't feel, kind of the example I gave earlier about principals not wanting to throw any of them under the bus by district staff or otherwise. If a principal makes a mistake, if they're struggling, what are we doing to support them and lift them up? How are we challenging them? Because they need to be challenged, but how are we also supporting them? And that's not to say we take sides against parents or communities or different employees. It's to say we're one district. And so this will be an example of how one group came together to try to give us their constructive, speaking as much of one voice as possible, knowing that even among that group, there's different ideas. And so they tried to come to consensus on offering to support us as a group. So just keep that in your mind as well. That's one piece of artifact that I'll be giving to all of you very soon, just so you all have that and kind of, we can use that in whatever format you think is appropriate for reorg, just to kind of that piece of it. So that was all I had.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for this great day. See no other business to come before this board. This meeting is adjourned. See everybody tomorrow.